Yes, that's right. Is it just maca? Of course it's more than that. Water has a source and trees have roots. Why does the Magical Congress prohibit muggles and wizards from interacting so strictly? These can still be pursued. But Aurelius doesn't need the rest. It's enough to get to the Magic Congress level. To be honest, Aurelius now likes the happy education of wizards. Only 300 years later, those who experienced the Salem witch-killing incident are still alive. But most wizards have forgotten this. They don't understand the preciousness of history, because their history is too short, and their magic is magical enough. But Aurelius didn't. He knew what it means to read history to be wise, and what you know can be used to draw lessons from the present. The books he collected included too many history books that had been packed and swept away. This made him understand the wizard community better. What should I do? Queenie took a deep breath and asked. Good news. As soon as she asked, her heart moved. The Magical Congress has stopped your love. If you want to love, you must live without the Magical Congress, Aurelius said. Queenie is a born legilimency, but she is not a born master of occlumency. If Aurelius wanted to, Queenie's brain couldn't stop him, but he didn't. It's not because of any superiority, it's mainly because Queenie is proficient in legilimency. Although she can't prevent it, she can detect it. This undoubtedly strengthened her resistance. Even without legilimency, Aurelius knew her well enough. To put it harshly, this girl is a love brain. In order to be with Jacob, she did not hesitate to turn to Grindelwald, so she could not refuse her own invitation. Okay. Queenie gritted her teeth and accepted. Welcome to join you, Queenie. Aurelius stretched out his hand. The woman he had been planning to recruit for nearly a year had finally been acquired. After receiving Queenie's official surrender, Aurelius was in a good mood. Even though he can also use legilimency, Queenie's only beauty seems to have become dispensable. But it is not the truth. Aurelius is just a person, and there are only a few people around him now. He feels that the essence is not worth the money. But as his wings gradually mature in the future, it will inevitably lead to a mixture of dragons and snakes who seek refuge. There are always times when he can't control it, and Queenie is like his clone. In fact, a born legilimency is really suitable for being a spy or agent, but Queenie's brain circuit is really dangerous. She needs to use it, but she can't use it casually. So Aurelius planned to let her be his royal supervisor and another pair of eyes and ears for his whip chief Mo-Gigi. Queenie came to Paris alone and had nowhere to go, so Aurelius directed her to stay in a hiding place. She came here on an excuse to take a vacation and put on a full show. And Aurelius couldn't be so unkind as to drive the girl away. Taking it back to the villa wasn't an option. Tina was there, but Tina wouldn't be able to stay long. If all goes well, within 3 days at most, those annoying looks should disappear. Silently, Aurelius walked out of his room, as if he had never left. Nagini prepared breakfast for everyone. After the meal, Aurelius asked Nagini to prepare the evening meal. Grindelwald will visit tonight. You too. Do you want to stay together tonight? Aurelius looked at Newt and Tina. Newt looked embarrassed, and Tina looked even colder. I'll give you a suggestion. If you go out for a walk, you probably don't want to see Grindelwald either. No. No? Aurelius said indifferently. Then you just stay. Aurelius didn't care, he really reminded him kindly. Of course, she was also worried that if Tina, a reckless man, didn't hold back, her villa, which had only been acquired for 2 days, would suffer. Aurelius was preparing to entertain Grindelwald in the evening, but people from several forces gathered in Paris. French Ministry of Magic, Place Furstenberg. Travers, Theseus and Lita arrived with dozens of ores. The French Ministry of Magic ores are handing it over. Cross-border law enforcement is impossible without reporting to the owner. In fact, if Travers' famous quote had not come to trouble Grindelwald, the French Ministry of Magic would never have agreed. You have no one in the Ministry of Magic? An order to receive us? Travers said dissatisfied. Who is he? The dignified director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement of the British Ministry of Magic. Not to mention the Minister of Magic in person, at least he must be at the same level, and even the director of the Auror office can be justified. But he was just an Auror, and he didn't even look like a squad leader. Mr. Travers, I'm sorry. I was originally going to ask Chief Kama to greet you, but he suddenly took leave yesterday and a lot of work was unable to be carried out. The director also went to direct it in person. He was definitely not deliberately neglecting you, Auror said bitterly. Oh? Is it the Wiccan party? Travers suddenly became energetic. This is not something I can know. Please come with me. The hall of the French Ministry of Magic looks very fashionable, with constellation patterns painted on the vaulted ceiling and full of Art Nouveau style. This is the open gene that has been injected into the French Ministry of Magic since its establishment. A hot French girl stood at the front desk, and a group of people passed by. Theseus glanced at the back and saw a somewhat familiar figure. It was a woman, but he didn't think it was a goose. Sunderland McGonagall has a very suspenseful passing with everyone from the Ministry of Magic. She had never done this kind of work before and was still a little nervous. Thank God. Thank you, Aberforth. Sunderland watched the people from the Ministry of Magic disappear at the end of the corridor with his peripheral vision, and he breathed a sigh of relief. Beside her was a man who seemed to always have a cold face, Aberforth Dumbledore. In other words, Aurelius' cheap dad. I don't know why he asked me to take you with me, but I hope your professor didn't go through the back door. Our time is very limited. Aberforth leaned closer to Sunderland and moved away. He spoke forcefully, as was his usual style. Where are we going? Bath Barburn. Albus didn't tell me where that was. Mysterious, he's always been like this. Aberforth muttered dissatisfied, and the two of them stepped onto the elevator leading to the outside world. Furstenberg Square is the entrance to the French Ministry of Magic. In the middle of the square, 4 symmetrical and standard trees stand, with a small bronze decorative statue at the center. An elevator cage composed entirely of tree branches and roots stopped, and Sunderland and Aberforth stepped out of it. People were coming and going around, but everyone turned a blind eye. The Muggle exorcism curse. This curse is simply a killer weapon for ordinary people. It is completely unreasonable to partially block the perception of ordinary people, which is one of the keys to the wizard being able to hide for so many years. Well, may I ask, are you wizards? I want to know how to get to the hiding place. This is my first time in Paris. Sunderland looked at the blonde girl in front of me who felt pity for me, and said apologetically, "Sorry, this is our first time in Paris." Is that so? Sorry, I'd better go to the Ministry of Magic and ask. I hope they can provide a map of Paris. Aberforth. Aberforth. Sunderland went to call Aberforth, but found that Aberforth's eyes were fixed on the witch who had just asked for directions, and he said with some displeasure, "Aberforth, now is not the time to admire beautiful women." "Don't you feel it?" Aberforth asked, frowning. "What?" "Forget it, it's nothing, maybe I'm overly sensitive." Aberforth shook his head, but the doubts in his heart did not dissipate. That feeling of being seen through just now. Under the elevator, Queenie patted her chest, feeling lingering fear. Her ability is not very obedient, she will always passively read the memories of everyone around her. Just now, she read some secrets. The tomb of Père Lachaise. Queenie remembered this place. She didn't expect that she was just asking for directions, and by chance, she asked about Aurelius's father. But she also learned a little secret, a prophecy. Aurelius, Queenie, what's wrong? Do you know about Tycho Dodonus's predictions? Aurelius frowned and thought for a while. He knew there was such a prophecy, but he couldn't remember the content of the prophecy clearly. Why do you suddenly ask about this? I met a man named Aberforth Dumbledore, and I saw it from his memory. Who? Aurelius was a little surprised. Aberforth Dumbledore, well, he seems to be. Queenie didn't know what to say. Aberforth and Aurelius were actually father and son, but they had never met. Okay, I understand what you mean. Tell me about the prophecy, you seem to know something. The man was cruelly exiled, the daughter was in deep despair, the warrior returned with revenge and spread his wings to fly from the water. Queenie recounted. There is a conjecture circulating among many wizards. They believe that you may be the character in the prophecy. Credence, an orphan abandoned in New York. They found out that you are a survivor of a shipwreck, and you are probably of the blood of the Lestrange family. After hearing Queenie's words, Aurelius was a little speechless. But this is to be expected. Credence was frantically searched for by Grindelwald, so of course Credence's name was detected by the Ministry of Magic, which regarded Grindelwald as a thorn in his side. Adhering to the belief that life will be easier for the enemy than for oneself, all parties will investigate Credence. It's not hard to find. Aurelius' long time as Credence was no secret. Shipwreck survivor, adopted by servants, raised in Second Salem. The most important thing is the witness, that is, the servant who sent him for adoption is still alive. Irma Dugard, a low-level half-blood elf. It was easy for the ministry to get her to talk. Irma is a servant of the Lestrange family. From her perspective, Credence is a descendant of the Strange family. This information has misled many people, because many people don't know Aurelius Dumbledore equals Credence. It was dark under the lamp, and while everyone was looking for Credence, Aurelius was hardly disturbed. Except for Newt, who learned about it from Dumbledore, and Tina, who had seen Credence come to the door. Of course, there is also Grindelwald. With the help of clues provided by the huge Wiccan party and its tendencies, Grindelwald also found Aurelius. Coincidentally, if he is the youngest son of the Lestrange family, then his situation is very consistent with the content of the prophecy. The French aristocrats living in New York, the brutal exile of men. Leta Lestrange, who has lived with guilt for killing her brother, her daughter is in deep despair. Abandoned with resentment, he came to Paris in search of his life experience. The warrior returned to his country with revenge. Survive a shipwreck, spread your wings and fly through the water. It seems that all of these can point to the youngest son of the Lestrange family, but there is one most unreasonable thing about this speculation. Grindelwald. Why are you looking for this kid from the Lestrange family? But Mr. Dumbledore seems to have other ideas, Queenie added. He thinks he is the one in the prophecy. Aurelius looked at her doubtfully. Where was this song coming from? Aurelius has seen some of the former in the movie, and it matches the plot somewhat. Why does Aberforth come to join in the fun? 28 years ago, Grindelwald, Albus, Aberforth and Ariana had a conflict. During the conflict, Ariana died and Grindelwald fled to Europe. Aurelius suddenly realized that this was the explanation. Grindelwald, who was responsible for killing Ariana, never went to England again. The man was brutally exiled. As an Obscurial, Ariana died in pain. Her daughter was in deep despair. Aberforth, who hated Grindelwald, saw himself as a warrior who returned to his country with revenge. As for this, spreading wings and flying from the water, do you still remember the goat-eating beast Antonio who was thrown into the Hudson River by Grindelwald? The goat-eating beast itself has wings. What a fuss. Aurelius couldn't help laughing. Aurelius never cared about prophecies. It wasn't that he didn't believe it. The prophecies in Harry Potter's worldview would all come true. But what was interesting was that there were countless explanations for just a few words in the prophecy. What's more interesting is that many people who think they have cracked the mystery of the prophecy actually promote the realization of the prophecy by mistake. For example, Aurelius knew no less than 4 versions of the prophecy of Dodonna's. Yusuf Karma, the black son of revenge, is limited to the version of the grudges between the Light Strange family and the Karma family, which is what the original movie led us to believe until Leta revealed the secret of Corvo's Lestran. The prophecy version of Chi's death before she died in a shipwreck. The complicated relationship surrounding Grindelwald and Dumbledore is the version Aberforth believed. The version of Credence's family search is the first interpretation of the prophecy that Queenie told Aurelius. The version of Aurelius' vengeance is based on some speculations from netizens in previous lives. They believe that the revenge warrior refers to Credence attacking Dumbledore because he resented the Dumbledore family for abandoning him, and finally returned home. Dumbledore is a member of the Phoenix family, so it's okay for Credence to be called Little Phoenix. Credence, who survived the shipwreck, is perfect for the final, spread his wings and fly from the water. These are all interpretations of prophecies, and they all sound reasonable. Aurelius could find dozens of interpretations like this. But with Aurelius traveling through time, the plot of this world has changed beyond recognition, and the prophecy interpretation in the original plot will inevitably not come true. So is there anything else? Yes, Aurelius can come up with more prophetic interpretations that fit this changed world. For example, Aurelius, a time traveler, was exiled to another world. Perhaps he could not crack the secret of the blood curse and could only watch Nagini completely lose his humanity in despair. Nagini's siren, during the confrontation, the siren's tamed Leviathan jumped out of the water and swallowed him. Nothing seems wrong, right? Well, a little bit. Then let's change to a savior prophecy that we love to hear. Grindelwald and his coven were expelled from all the Ministry of Magic because he manipulated the election with the intention of driving Qilin through evil means and became the cruel exile of the man. The newly elected president of the International Confederation of Wizards, Visha Santos, wants to eliminate Grindelwald and his henchmen, the terrorists who intend to start a war between Muggles and Wizards. However, the objective gap in strength makes him a deeply desperate person. Daughter. As the only wizard in the world who could compete with Grindelwald, Dumbledore lost the confinement of the Blood Alliance. He did his part and led the wizards to fight against Grindelwald on his own. In the end, he defeated Grindelwald in the Duel of the Century in 1945 and imprisoned him in Nurmengard. The revenge was successful, and then lived in seclusion at Hogwarts to complete the return of the brave soldier. So what about the last sentence? How can two people who are evenly matched discuss their superiority? The last sentence is the magic weapon to win. The little phoenix Aurelius survived the shipwreck and became the key to Grindelwald and Dumbledore. Whoever can defeat him will win. There are various interpretations of the prophecy, and this is just what Aurelius deduced based on important roles. There are billions of people in the world, and there are probably more than 10 or 20,000 who can understand it. So Aurelius pretended not to see the prophecy. If it is true, it will eventually come true regardless of whether you know it or not. If it is false, then you don't even care. But who made other wizards attach great importance to prophecies? Aurelius has no profit and cannot afford to be early. Since other wizards believe in prophecies, there is profit in it. Tomb of Père Lachaise? Okay, I understand. Aurelius nodded after hearing the last news from Queenie. That is a very important place. The ancestral graves of the Lestrange family are there. There is the bloodline tree of the Lestrange family, also called the family tree. It was because of its existence that Paul Herman and other senior officials from the Ministry of Magic of various countries believed that Aurelius was a member of the Dumbledore family. If you want to confirm those rumors, go there to find the answers. Of course, that was not the purpose of Aberforth's trip, but Queenie knew about it from Aberforth's memory. After cutting off the contact, Aurelius was thinking on the sofa. Aberforth and a witch named Sunderland McGonagall came to protect him. Like Newt, he also came from Dumbledore's instructions. This is quite unusual. This is not because he is worried about his own Obscurus going berserk, otherwise Newt alone would be enough. Facing the runaway Obscurus, having one more person or one person less makes little difference. I'm afraid things have changed, Aurelius murmured to himself. He suspected that Aberforth and Sunderland McGonagall were really here to protect him. The reason was that Dumbledore learned that someone was going to harm him, and based on Dumbledore's judgment, he might even threaten Aurelius in the Obscurus state, Sri Lanka. Obscurus' vitality is very strong, but his defense ability is average. He is a typical character with high attack power and thick blood. A careful siege by a dozen Aurors could break the original Credence into pieces. This is why Aurelius listed the Iron Armor Curse and Apparition as must-learn spells. The former enhances defense, while the latter can escape. Safety issues Aurelius is not worried. He now has a version of the Phoenix that is stronger than Apparition. He can run away even if he cannot be beaten. These skills are something Dumbledore doesn't know. But what he was thinking about was who would do harm to him. This is weird. Although the whole world was looking for myself before, it was just searching and would not necessarily be detrimental to me. But now Dumbledore's reaction told him that Dumbledore had confirmed that someone was going to be detrimental to him. Britain. The Ministry of Magic. Aurelius thought about it, and he felt that this was the best possibility. Newt has mentioned before that the British Ministry of Magic hired the notorious hunter of magical creatures Gunnar Grimson to find him, and even made it clear that he would not let himself fall into the hands of Grindelwald. In other words, you can kill yourself in an emergency. Dumbledore is in Hogwarts, England. Although he is well informed and has friends all over the world, he may have made such a big deal in such an emergency. This must be something he has personally experienced or verified. This forced Aurelius to suspect that this force came from England. What power does Britain have? It's nothing more than Dumbledore's own social network and the Ministry of Magic. As for those pure blood families, they have no reason, no courage, and no ability to do this. Could it be that Grimson's identity as an undercover agent was exposed? The Ministry of Magic wants to destroy me at all costs. Aurelius frowned and thought. That doesn't make sense. Grindelwald had been found long before this. Grimson, could get away with it by just pretending to be still looking. How did he get exposed? Aurelius stood up. He had to figure it out. He wasn't even sure who was going to kill him. Isn't this a joke? Thinking of this, Aurelius hurried out. Aurelius, where are you going? Tina shouted after him. Don't follow. Aurelius didn't even look back, but the warning contained in it made Tina stop. After going out, Aurelius looked up at a tall building in the distance, where someone was watching his house day and night. As an Obscurus, Aurelius' perception can be very great. Just release a little black zero to make the entire area invisible. After waving there, Aurelius turned and entered the tree-lined path next to the villa. On the high building, two wizards in suits looked at each other. Just now, were they greeting them? Mr. Sohoro. The old man who was meditating with his eyes closed opened his eyes and said with a sinister look on his face, "What's wrong?" He seems to have noticed us. He just greeted us and seemed to want us to go over. A wizard looked embarrassed. Oh? Sure enough, this kid is not simple. No wonder Mr. Grindelwald looked at him like this. You guys stand by. I will go meet this kid for a while. Suo Chualuo stood up and disappeared without a trace in a flash. It's really scary. It's the first time I've seen someone cast the apparition spell without a wand. The wizard who was left behind sighed with emotion. Otherwise, how could I be treated so politely by Sir? Sir is the honorific title given to Grindelwald by the Wiccan party. It does not have any master like a certain Dark Lord. This is related to Grindelwald's proposition. Under his proposition, wizards are one, and he is just the leader of these wizard parties. They are leaders and followers, not masters and servants. Although Grindelwald rarely treats his subordinates as human beings, don't expect him to be very kind. Most people in the Wiccan party are in awe of him. Can ordinary people be treated so kindly and angrily by him? Do you know who Mr. Sohoro is? I only know that he is a Chinese wizard. Why? The other wizard shook his head. No one knows about this. It can't be the Chinese Minister of Magic, right? You might as well be the Chinese Dumbledore. After being ridiculed by his companions for a while, the wizard was a little embarrassed and muttered. That's not true, that country is very mysterious, no one knows who will show up. Aurelius sat on a stone bench, with a stone table in front of him, carriages, horses and cannons already placed, and 2 bowls of tea served. Aurelius's appearance did not surprise Aurelius. After all, he had already been surprised. This was the first time he knew that there were actually Chinese wizards in Grindelwald's witchcraft party. Suo Chualuo has white hair and a childish face, and his eyes are bright, but the eyes that always exude a negative aura make people look sinister. He wears a flower feather on his head, a pearl on his neck, and a patchwork gown. This outfit looks out of place with the surrounding Western-style buildings. After appearing, he does not squint his eyes, steps in all directions, and is full of power. It can be seen that this person has undergone strict etiquette training, and his walking style has been integrated into his instinct. It's the kind of royal etiquette deep in the palace compound. This old man has an unusual background. Aurelius' expression remained unchanged and he sighed in his heart. He picked up the teapot and poured it into the cup opposite him, with a smile in his eyes. The old gentleman seems to be very worried. Suo Chualuo narrowed his eyes and said in a cold voice, "Barbarians from overseas also understand the Chinese gift? It's just a joke to wear a crown while wearing a monkey's head." Ha ha ha. Okay, old gentleman, please sit down. Aurelius couldn't help but become happy, stretched out his hand to salute, lifted his hem, and sat down opposite Aurelius. "May I ask the old gentleman what your last name is?" "I'm Suo Chualuo Jing Si." "So Chualuo. No wonder." Aurelius understood clearly and asked, "I wonder which sect, sir. Do you also know the gateway to the east?" "I am the shaman of Jin Shan." Aurelius nodded in agreement, which was reasonable. If this old guy really told Mao Shan and Tianxi, he would feel awkward. "If you are a guest from afar, the doctor will go first. There's no need to talk nonsense. Since you know that I'm watching you, you might as well say it bluntly. Why do you want to see me?" Suo Chualuo didn't give any face, and didn't have any oriental subtlety. "Okay, then let me tell you something straight. Grimson is one of yours, right?" As soon as Aurelius finished speaking, Suo Chualuo frowned. "You don't have to answer. I just want to ask if the job he took at the British Ministry of Magic was exposed?" Suo Chualuo shook his head. "I don't know, Mu Sen." Aurelius looked at Sohoro's calm look and asked, "Sir, you are not a member of the Wiccan party, are you?" Although it is a question, it is very certain. There is no doubt that Grimson is a follower of Grindelwald. This is the plot of the previous Life movie. I have only been in this world for less than a year. For such a long-term thing, I should not be able to flap my wings that fast. Either Solo was not a member of the Wiccan party, or Grimson had a special identity that not only ordinary people didn't know about, but probably no one except Grindelwald. There are only these 2 possibilities, so regardless of Aurelius' words, he is just touching one possibility. "Those who are not of my race must have different minds." Suo Chualuo snorted. "This old thing is too salty. Did Grindelwald know that you slandered Grindelwald so much?" "Old sir, I want to invite Mr. Grindelwald to a banquet tonight." Aurelius couldn't hold back and asked. "What's wrong with saying that? I've always been straightforward, even in front of him, I would say the same thing," Suo Chualuo said arrogantly. "Okay, you are awesome. Then I'm really curious, what is the relationship between the old gentleman and Grindelwald?" "Cooperation. That's for sure, but what's the content?" Aurelius asked. Suo Chualuo laughed. "Why do I have to tell you?" Aurelius' expression froze, He raised his eyes and stared at Suo Chualuo, and soon he started laughing. The old gentleman is charming and graceful. I am lucky to have known him for 3 lifetimes. Mr. Trouble told Mr. Grindelwald that I have prepared a banquet at home and am waiting for his arrival. Easy to say. Aurelius stood up and left, and the table, stool, chess game, and tea bowl were scattered like sand blown by the wind. Suo Chualuo gave them away, but his eyebrows were twisted into a ball. This meeting was confusing, and Aurelius's various behaviors showed that he had something to ask. But now he has the answer. Suo Chualuo recalled every sentence he just said, feeling a little confused. Did Aurelius get his answer? Inevitable. Aurelius did not expect that this old guy, who seemed difficult to deal with, had almost no defense in his brain. Aurelius had to know about Grimson's situation, so he even used his last resort when Sohoro deliberately refused to cooperate, to forcibly search his records. In Aurelius's opinion, at Sotrolo's age, even with a little talent, he should be able to detect legilimency. He was ready to fight Suo Chualuo. Unexpectedly, Suo Chualuo didn't notice at all. This sounds outrageous. Soshoro is very powerful. He possesses 2 kinds of supernatural powers, a wizard and a shaman. He has extraordinary talent and a lifetime of lust. Aurelius might be able to defeat him based on strength alone, but Soshoro's methods become more and more demonic as he gets older. That's also endless. But unfortunately, he doesn't understand the spirit. From Sotrolo's memory, Aurelius discovered Grimson, but Sohoro didn't speak. He really didn't know Grimson and didn't know who Grimson was. This old guy is evil and cooperates with Grindelwald for the purpose of restoration. Jinshan Shaman has a very close connection with the previous dynasty, and he himself is from a noble family, so it is natural for him to have such an idea. Except for Grindelwald, he didn't care about the other witches. It's not exposed, so why does the British Ministry of Magic suddenly want to deal with me? Aurelius wondered. But fortunately, there is still news, that is, Aurelius knows who the unlucky guy was killed by his magic trap. It was indeed Grimson's subordinate, and because he was killed, Grindelwald replaced Sotralo to monitor him. I'm really petty. I have no intention of running away. Aurelius shook his head. This is indeed the social trend. Western society is a contract society. At best, it means abiding by the contract, but at worst, as long as the contract is not written down, it cannot be trusted. Wizards are also inevitably affected by this. So when Aurelius said in vain that he would invite Grindelwald to dinner in 3 days, Grindelwald appeared to be generous on the surface, but in fact he added a few precautions. Of course, if a crow lands on a pile of coal, no one should blame anyone. Aurelius, who came from later generations, was equally suspicious and would not trust character casually. It seems that we can only wait until tonight to get more detailed information from Grindelwald. Mr. Soshoro, is there anything unusual? Grindelwald wears his iconic coat, with short snow-white hair standing straight up. Wearing a pair of marten boots, shiny. No matter what the person is like, at least in terms of face, the adjective British gentleman is more suitable for Grindelwald. Very honest, but he should have discovered us a long time ago. He deliberately wanted to see me today. Suo Chualuo still has the same character of saying whatever he wants. Oh? He asked Grimson if he was exposed. Grindelwald listened to the whole scene of Sotrero's meeting today. His eyes narrowed with interest. He turned to ask the man who was also wearing an exquisite dress. Vita Roche. What's going on over there in the UK? Vita is very confident, and holds most of the secrets of the Umbrella Party. He keeps all the information in his bag at all times. Toker Travers, director of the Legal Enforcement Department of the British Ministry of Magic, told Albus Dumbledore issued a ban prohibiting him from teaching defense against the dark arts classes. This morning, Travers led more than 20 Aurors to Paris. What's the purpose? This is unclear at the moment. The British Ministry of Magic is alone overseas, and following your wishes, we have barely penetrated it. Some families who voluntarily surrendered were also rejected by gifts, Vita said softly. Grindelwald thought for a while. Apart from gatherings, do we do anything else these days? No. This meeting is our most important thing at the moment. You have explained that this is the most important action after obtaining Aurelius's services, so we have almost suspended all other actions and are fully preparing for it. Vita's meaning was clear, but she did not express her judgment. She is very aware of her position. She is a tool, and tools cannot carry any personal emotions. How to use a tool depends only on the will of the tool owner. It seems that the British Ministry of Magic wants to declare war on us. Grindelwald showed a hint of disdain. It's not that he is arrogant, but without Dumbledore, all the wizards in Britain combined would not be enough for him to fight. The core members of the Wu Kui party are all elites, and every official member is a ruthless character who can take on at least 3 or 5 Aurors in a single fight. Grindelwald, a member of the Wiccan party, has at least 1,000 people. How many divisions does the British Ministry of Magic have? Be careful. Even if Grindelwald despises these old Englishmen who can't tell the situation, the stakes are big and what he has to do is a big thing. He doesn't want these bugs to ruin his fun. Mr. Grindelwald, in my humble opinion, I am afraid that the primary target of those English people may not be the assembly, but Aurelius, Sotero reminded. Grindelwald nodded solemnly. It was not difficult to guess. Aurelius would not ask Sotraro about Grimson for no reason, which shows that he is aware of the abnormality and even danger. According to Vita's intelligence, Dumbledore seems to have encountered suspicion and even hostility from the British Ministry of Magic. At the same time, between himself and Aurelius is obviously easier to mess with. All signs are pointing to one goal, to destroy Aurelius to defeat his plan. Ah. If it's that simple, you would be looking down on Aurelius. Grindelwald smiled meaningfully and said to Vita, let's go to G. After that, adjusted his collar, raised his legs and walked towards the Villa Aurelius across the road. In the villa, Tina and Newt were restless, while Nagini sat beside them. Aurelius closed his eyes and meditated. Can you stop acting like 2 monkeys? I told you early on, if you don't want the result, go out for a walk. Aurelius could see the embarrassment of the 2 of them without opening his eyes. Tina proposed more than once that she could inform the French Ministry of Magic, but Aurelius refused and stopped her. One cannot let one's own character be completely ruined. No, I can't. Newt lowered his head and played with his fingers. 2 of them were almost knotted. Here it comes. Aurelius opened his eyes, pushed it left and right with both hands, and the door of the villa slowly opened, and Grindelwald and Vita came in the dark. Long time no see, Aurelius. Grindelwald stood across the long table, condescending, but there was no sense of oppression at all, and his strange eyes did not make people shudder. Instead, it was filled with gentle care. It seems that the person in front of me is not a super dark wizard who makes the entire European Ministry of Magic panic, but a kind monarch. Don't use coercion to control people. Don't use fear to control people. Spread your kindness to the world, and rule the country with your name. I have to admit, Mr. Grindelwald, you have changed a lot. Aurelius admired. After meeting several times, the initial impression was that he was harsh and dismissive. The second time we met, he was fierce and powerful, single-handedly subduing dozens of Aurors from the United States. But this meeting gave him a new feeling. For the same 2 of them, what made Grindelwald change so much? It is the transformation of Aurelius's identity. He has changed from a squib regarded as an ant by Grindelwald to a talented wizard who can travel together. You are very good, but I made a mistake. Grindelwald admitted his mistakes without hesitation. He glanced at Newt and Tina, who were clutching their wands, and didn't pay attention. Vita opened the seat directly opposite Aurelius with a hint, and Grindelwald sat down. The napkin was neatly tucked into the collar. It seemed like they were really just here for a big meal. Aurelius smiled. That's right. Although Grindelwald is not without flaws, his powerful personality is sought after by countless fans, and has also led countless Wiccan followers to risk their lives to follow him. It's natural to have this calmness. Nagini, the guests have arrived, Aurelius said to Nagini. Nagini nodded slightly, swaying the wand in his hand, and Epopin's exquisite French food slowly floated out of the kitchen. Nagini's exposure to magic was very short, and she was not a super genius like Aurelius, but her levitation spell was very superb. It's very fragrant. It's really thoughtful. I haven't eaten such authentic French food in a few years, Grindelwald praised. Polite compliments are a courtesy that every guest deserves. As long as you like it, everyone, please. On the long dining table, people are polite. Grindelwald was content. Aurelius also welcomed him warmly. Nagini seemed to be piquing at Vita's elegant posture and competing secretly. Newt and Tina were like 2 outsiders, sullen and motionless. The hand holding the wand almost broke it. Thank you for your hospitality, Aurelius, it was delicious. Grindelwald placed the knife and fork horizontally, with the fork on top and the knife on the bottom. This is a lingo on the Western dining table, indicating that you are very satisfied with the meal. If you are in a restaurant, you will immediately see the waiter coming to you to ask for a tip. At this moment, Grindelwald used this method to praise the host's hospitality. Westerners are not used to talking about serious business at the dinner table. This meal is very pure, but as the meal ends, what is supposed to come will always come. In the living room, Newt and Tina looked at them nervously. Nagini and Vita were also far away, but there was no worry in their eyes. In Vita's eyes, Grindelwald is omnipotent. Coincidentally, with more than half a year of strategizing, Nagini's trust in Aurelius has already skyrocketed. Oh, look, how nervous they are. Grindelwald held a tea bowl in his hand. He had never drunk Oriental tea, but unfortunately, Aurelius only had this here, and he was not used to drinking English tea. Of course they are nervous. They are less than 20 feet away from the 22nd Division, the most dangerous black witch in the world. Aurelius smiled. I have to apologize to you, Aurelius, for treating you as a squib, which gave rise to a series of misunderstandings. Grindelwald spoke again. Didn't I also leave you a little surprise? Mr. Grindelwald, we are even. Aurelius looked at him with a smile in his eyes. Grindelwald looked at Aurelius with his eyes, and suddenly laughed. You remind me of my old friend, what a green time. Albus Dumbledore. Then you are really overestimating yourself. That is the great Dumbledore. How can I dare to compare with it? Of course, there are differences between you and him, but you are very similar to me. I can see your ambition and your ability. Grindelwald pointed at his peculiar eye. Is it another prophecy? To be honest, I have heard a lot of prophecies these days. Aurelius shook his head and seemed to sigh. Why do people bother with things that are destined to be unchangeable? Seek good luck and avoid bad luck. Yes, people want to know their own destiny, but also want to change their destiny. It is also difficult to change destiny. So, you don't believe in prophecies? Grindelwald asked curiously. Aurelius shook his head and avoided talking. Let's get down to business, Mr. Grindelwald. You specially sent a messenger to send me a greeting card. Isn't it just to apologize to a little person like me? Little person. Aurelius, you have been persecuted too much by your adoptive mother. We are wizards, and you and I are only a handful. Why do we call ourselves little people? The world is very big, but wizards only live in a small corner. Muggles are ignorant and cowardly, but they can dominate the world. Is this right? Everything in the world should be dominated by virtuous people, and wizards should be in charge of it. Are you right? Seeing that Grindelwald was once again preaching to him about his so-called legal rationale for wizards to dominate the world, Aurelius shook his head and smiled. Mr. Grindelwald, I am not your believer. It will be very tempting to wizards, but don't forget, I grew up in a Muggle family. Do you really think wizards are nobler than Muggles? Do you really think wizards should be more qualified to dominate the world than Muggles? Aurelius stared at him and said word by word, or, you are, afraid. Grindelwald frowned slightly. Aurelius' words touched his mind. He had predicted that in the near future, an unprecedented war would occur in the Muggle world. This is also the source of his fear. Especially the terrifying mushroom cloud that could destroy a city in an instant. As a wizard, at least he or Dumbledore would have to have the strength to do it. It is possible, but not certain. What's even more frightening is that it seems that super wizards like Dumbledore and himself are completely dependent on their fate. There are 2 of them now, and Aurelius may be added in the future. But what if there is a vacancy during that period? On the other hand, Muggle mushroom eggs can be produced continuously. This was what frightened him the most among Muggles. As long as he could create the first one, there would be countless. This is the power of technology and industrialization, which is far beyond the reach of handicrafts like wizards. Maybe Muggles won't discover wizards in 10 or 20 years, but what about 100 or 200 years? What about the longer term? You know, for wizards who are born with a long lifespan, 100 or 200 years is not too long a time to play. But Grindelwald has no one to talk to about such worries. He can only encourage more wizards to stand on his side, and work with him to preemptively rule the world before the birth of that terrible weapon, and will enter the rapid burst of technology, sweeping them into the trash. Haha. Rarely, I saw a bitter expression on Grindelwald's face, and even a bit depressed. He leaned on the back of the sofa and looked up at the crystal pendant on the ceiling. His eyes gradually blurred. You are very foresight. Then you must understand that if you don't take the lead at this time, the future of the wizard is destined to be dim. Then, as a member of the wizard, shouldn't you stand with me? Aurelius smiled and shook his head. Of course I foresee these. This does not require your prophetic ability. Mr. Grindelwald, have you ever thought about whether your prediction was wrong? An error? Absolutely impossible. Grindelwald was resolute. He was full of trust in his eyes. Not once wrong. Not once wrong. Aurelius smiled. Well, since you have made a prophecy, the prophecy will definitely come true. You have seen the terrible creations made by the Muggles in the future. So you decided to provoke a war in advance to rule the Muggles. If you succeed, your prediction ability will not be accurate. If your prediction ability is accurate, then you will definitely fail. Have you considered it? Grindelwald took a deep breath. It wasn't that he didn't expect such a thing, but he subconsciously avoided it. Now that he was exposed mercilessly by Aurelius, he was a little bit embarrassed. Of course, a wizard like him will not easily shake his belief. Even if I fail, I will have no regrets, because I have tried hard and fought with all my strength. Instead of being like those stupid people who shrink their heads and pretend not to know anything and wait to die. Bang bang bang. Aurelius applauded him and encouraged him. He admired such a determined person, who continued to move forward even if he knew there was a dead end. But I still won't join you. Are you going to be that stupid person who is greedy for life and afraid of death? Aurelius shook his head. No, of course not. You have your opinion, and I also have my ambition. I have no intention of convincing you, because I know that neither of us can give up our goals. Mr. Grindelwald, we are not on the same journey after all. You parted ways with Albus Dumbledore because of your ideas. You spent nearly 30 years practicing your ideas. Dumbledore insisted on his ideas in Britain. Now you come to invite me to join your greatness. I still can only refuse. You have your great interests, and I also have my blueprint. The world is still uncertain. You and I are both dark horses. Who knows who is right and who is wrong? Deeply in love, Grindelwald closed his eyes and sighed quietly. He felt that his least expected premonition had come true. The two sides in the duel in Paris would not be Aurelius and Dumbledore as he had hoped, but instead it might be him and Aurelius. What should he do? Should we deal with this key figure in advance, or should we let it go? Let me make a suggestion. Aurelius said when Grindelwald was upset. Grindelwald looked at him in confusion. What suggestion could he make after he rejected it? The whole world wants to pit you against Dumbledore. Well, they're idiots. Dumbledore can never stop me. That's right, because of the Blood Alliance, you can't take action against each other. Aurelius told the secret without hesitation. Grindelwald frowned. Aurelius pointed to the pendant on his collar. Unfortunately, I have seen this thing in a book. You're surprising me more and more. Tell me your suggestions. I'm very interested, Grindelwald smiled. When two tigers fight, one of them will be injured. The greater possibility is that the mantis stalks the cicada and the oriole leaves behind. Aurelius's Chinese proverb was a bit difficult for Grindelwald to understand, but he understood the general meaning. Can you speak well? Chinese is too difficult to understand. Grindelwald looked at Aurelius with a headache. Why are you using Chinese when two Westerners are talking? Are you showing off? Sorry, I'm used to it. Aurelius was also helpless. He was originally Chinese. How could the habits of decades in his previous life disappear without a trace in less than a year? He always brought them out unconsciously. These things are why many people think that he loves Chinese culture. You and Dumbledore are the two poles of the world. There are countless ambitious people in the world. Once you have a direct conflict, it is most likely that both of you will suffer losses. At that time, these crazy hyenas will bite your corpses. Mr. Grindelwald, no matter what you admit it or not, the Blood Alliance that seems to be restricting you now is helping you avoid the most direct child. You're right. Grindelwald admitted. This is the biggest difference between him and Voldemort. Until now, Grindelwald has been in the period of rapid development of his career, but Grindelwald cannot shy away from his mistakes. On the other hand, Voldemort, even though he was completely defeated, still had a mouth as tough as a steel plate. Others don't know about the existence of the Blood Alliance. I can help you get rid of these troubles. What's the meaning? Aurelius pointed to the Deathly Hallows brooch on his collar. The triangle is the most stable geometric structure in the world. This world needs the emergence of the third pole. You need the third pole, and Dumbledore also needs the third pole. Pole. Grindelwald looked at Aurelius' calm gaze in surprise and laughed. So that's it. Ha ha ha, no wonder. No wonder. Okay, tell me what you want. Aurelius pointed his finger, and a world map appeared on the coffee table. With a light wave of the wand tip, the world was divided into two halves along the Atlantic Ocean, and the land belonging to America shone with a bright blue light. The chaos of the world has already shown its signs, whether it is the war that affected the magic world 10 years ago, or the future. There are 5 continents and 4 oceans, and ambitious people emerge in endlessly. This is a world of great strife. Aurelius actually went to Grindr. Wa talks about the world situation. Dumbledore is trapped on an isolated island. Although he has connections with all parts of the world, his gentle views are destined to prevent him from acting like you and me. Your base is in European countries, right? Otherwise, why would you live in Magical Congress for more than half a year? Then your expansion is only Dumbledore's Britain and Asia and Africa, no matter where. America is a place beyond your reach. This is what I want. Aurelius began to divide the world with Grindelwald without any politeness. Why should I do this? You should know that what I want to do must be to unify the magic world, and it is impossible for me to share it with you. Unify the magic world. Well, if you can unify all the magic world except America, I won't need you to mention it. I will visit you personally and be willing to drive away, Aurelius said with a chuckle. Are you making a bet with me? Grindelwald smiled. Aurelius laughed. If Mr. Grindelwald is interested, I will take a gamble with you. Okay. Let's limit it to 10 years. During these 10 years, no matter what you do in America, my people will not interfere. After 10 years, I will wait for you to join me in my Nurmengard. Like today, I will prepare the most sumptuous welcome banquet for you. As he spoke, Grindelwald stretched out his palm, and the magic on his hand flashed. Obviously, this was a contract, or rather. Bet. Okay. It's a deal. Aurelius happily shook Grindelwald's hand. The contract was established. This bet is worth it. If Grindelwald can really unify all places except the Americas, Aurelius will be reunited peacefully. It's also a huge contribution, but Aurelius did not expect this. Just kidding. What else will you play after you become Harry Potter? What else will Voldemort play? Wizards are used to being lazy. Grindelwald's military and national line may win the service of some wizards, but it will definitely not win the hearts and minds of most wizards. The key to shaping a wizard's outlook lies in the magic school. Dumbledore saw this, but Grindelwald did not. What happened in Britain? As expected, you have noticed that the British Ministry of Magic wants to eliminate you in order to weaken me. Grindelwald looked at Aurelius leisurely, with a bit of teasing. If it were before, Grindelwald still had hope for Aurelius, believing that Aurelius could be his sharpest sword against Dumbledore. The behavior of the British Ministry of Magic in this situation really annoyed Grindelwald. But now, the 10-year agreement has been concluded, and there must be no subordinate relationship between them. Although it is not a hostile relationship, if he can see Aurelius being unlucky, Grindelwald will not mind having a little more fun. As expected. Aurelius nodded. Did Dumbledore break up with the Ministry of Magic? How do you know? I am a member of the Dumbledore family. Will they attack me rashly without Dumbledore's permission? The Ministry of Magic has issued a ban prohibiting Dumbledore from teaching defense against the dark arts at Hogwarts. Grindelwald nodded. That's it, Mr. Grindelwald. The British Ministry of Magic is provoking you. As far as I know, they should have arrived in Paris. Aurelius teased. Haha. But it's you they want to deal with. Grindelwald would not be fooled. Sitting on the mountain and watching the fight between tigers and tigers was undoubtedly the most correct choice. It would be best to fight fiercely and bloody, and it would be best to drag Dumbledore into the water and force Dumbledore to come forward and completely break with the British wizarding world. The British wizarding world without Dumbledore is nothing worth mentioning. Seeing that Grindelwald was not on the road, Aurelius could only shake his head and smile. He had no hope in the first place, and it was a three-pronged victory. It seems that I have to help you this time, Aurelius said with emotion. Hey, you are as cunning as a little fox. To each other, old fox. Ha ha ha. Okay, just think of it as you helping me once, Grindelwald readily agreed. You always have to give some benefits, just give them if they are a favor. He took out his pocket watch from his breast pocket and looked at it. Grindelwald stood up and said, Well, thank you for your hospitality, Aurelius. I think it's time for me to go. There are still many things to do. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Dr. Lindwall. Me too. Grindelwald nodded to Vita, who naturally came to Grindelwald's side. Aurelius and Nagini sent them out. Grindelwald did not speak to Tina and Newt from beginning to end. Instead, before leaving, he sent an invitation to Aurelius. Ming, in the evening, I will give a lecture at the tomb of Père Lachaise. If you are free, you are welcome to come and take a look. Must. Watch them disapparate away. Let's go back. Aurelius turned back to the villa, looked at Nagini's angry expression, and asked strangely, What's wrong with you? Why are you looking like this? That woman. She was mocking me for being sloppy. Nagini's eyes were filled with fire. Aurelius looked up and down strangely. Nagini was very well dressed. If we talk about makeup, then Nagini is almost without makeup. This girl can't even comb her hair. There are always some strands of hair sticking out when she pulls her hair up, let alone makeup. But although the makeup is sloppy, it cannot match a person's natural beauty. A little sloppiness not only does not affect the beauty, but adds a bit of wild beauty. Nagini just doesn't have any jewelry. She wears a deep versus dress with fish scales, which is both her performance costume and her favorite dress. She often wears it as regular clothes. Aurelius thought for a while and finally figured it out. Don't worry about Nagini. Vita Rosier comes from a French aristocratic family, and everything she accepts is aristocratic etiquette. If you have no makeup or jewelry, she will call you sloppy, which is just one-sided and narrow-minded. It's just a deformed aesthetic, Aurelius said. That woman is so pretentious. I don't know who to show her arrogance to. Nagini was still full of resentment. She and Vita seemed to be at odds with each other from the first moment they met. A black swan from a noble family, a Haidongqing from the slums. The black swan prides itself on being noble and elegant. It drinks dew and eats fresh fruits. It looks down on Haidongqing, who braves the wind and snow to hunt and stains its white feathers with blood. Although the black swan is beautiful, which man can resist an eagle striking the sky, and Haidongqing, who is constantly striving for self-improvement? Sir, he didn't agree. Vita asked doubtfully. His ambition is greater than I thought. Grindelwald did not answer directly. I don't know how to praise you. Sir, do you want to? Grindelwald glanced at Vita, who stood cautiously and said no more. She forgot that she shouldn't be smart. He did not choose to stand with us, but he also did not become our enemy. We seem to be able to accept this result. It's acceptable, but I have a huge question. Who is he targeting? Grindelwald was a little confused. In his prophecy, Aurelius fights someone in the streets of Paris, whom he initially thought was Dumbledore, then suspected it might be him after learning Aurelius's last name. But now, under the 10-year agreement, it was impossible for him to be fighting Aurelius. If he did not join the Wiccan party, it was impossible for him to be fighting Dumbledore. That would be strange. Who else? It can't be Nicolema, can it? Or 10 years from now. Grindelwald thought about it and felt that it might also be a prophecy made a long time ago. After all, it predicted that Aurelius would be powerful, and Aurelius had not yet come into contact with magic a year ago. No matter how talented he is, he and Dumbledore are the only ones. To be fair, Grindelwald thought that he did not have such strength when he was 18 or 19 years old. How is the situation? Suo Chualuo came up and asked. Grindelwald said, now that Mr. Losoro is here, there is no need for surveillance here. Whether it was successful or not, Grindelwald didn't say, and Suo Chualuo didn't continue to ask. He came to Paris purely as an ally to attend Grindelwald's rally. Mr. Sohoro, after the meeting, I will fulfill my promise. That's best. Suo Chualuo nodded. I always keep my word. In the villa. What did you talk about? Tina asked Aurelius. Why didn't you ask Grindelwald just now? Aurelius looked at her funny. Okay, Ms. Tina, Grindelwald has given up looking for me, and your goal has been achieved. That's all you need to know. Aurelius waved his hand. He couldn't wait to see off the guests, so he kept Tina by his side just because he was afraid that the girl's brain would get hot and cause trouble again. Now that everything is going well, he will naturally not force Tina to stay. Mr. Scamander. Aurelius turned to look at Newt. I know, Mr. Dumbledore, now that you are sure you are safe, I can go back to England. After all, my international travel ban has not been lifted yet. Newt said consciously. He could feel magical animals. The moods, anger, sorrows and joys of the people were quite different. He could see that Aurelius didn't like him and Tina. No, you misunderstood, I wanted to say. Before he finished speaking, Aurelius's expression suddenly changed. The black mist scattered around the villa sensed that a large number of people were apparating towards them. Grindelwald's people. No. Aurelius immediately made a judgment. The way those people dress is completely different from the very recognizable Wu Kui party. But that well-trained look is not fake, it's an aura. Aurelius thought for a moment. It came so quickly. Aurelius was a little surprised by the speed of the British aura's movements. In his impression, the common characteristic of Western countries is low efficiency. Unexpectedly, they had just arrived in Paris in the morning and they would launch an operation against themselves in the evening. There's an attack. Get ready. Aurelius' eyes flashed with fierceness. Aurelius was mentally prepared for the battle. This is inevitable for him, and it will be much better to be mentally prepared in advance. Upon hearing this, Nagini quickly pulled out her wand, crouched down, and hid behind the marble pillars. She looked around with her beautiful eyes warily, but she kept squeezing the fingers of the wand, which showed the nervousness in her heart. After all, She is just a girl of 18 or 19. It is not an exaggeration to say that she knows nothing about fighting. It's already good to think of holding a wand and crouching down to reduce one's own targets. In contrast, Newt and Tina reacted much faster. Almost as soon as Aurelius spoke, Newt's wand had already released the disillusionment curse, and he became one with the villa. This is Newt's habit of dealing with magical animals all year round. He doesn't want to harm these animals, so he starts by protecting himself and hiding. As an elite Auror, Tina immediately cast a spell on herself, Supersensory Appearance. Psychic Spell. This is a magic spell that can greatly enhance one's own perception, not only of one's own perception, but also of the outside world. It sounds like this is a magic spell that must be learned in battle, but in fact there are very few wizards who do this. The reason is that ordinary wizards have not received special training, and the various senses suddenly enhanced by the supersensory spell will instantly bring a lot of information. Without special training, these super perceptions will not only not help in combat, but may impact the brain in an instant, making you forget what you should do. The only way to overcome this instantaneous amount of information is to train continuously to exercise your ability to filter and refine information. Not everyone can do this kind of water grinding skill, and those without talent can easily be turned into an idiot. This resulted in this curse being rarely used even by Aurors. Tina's habitual use of supersensory spells shows that she is definitely an elite Auror among the elite in terms of strength. If the side effects of the supersensory curse can be overcome, this curse will become the most powerful magic weapon to improve combat ability, and there may even be no one. Aurelius once wanted to include it as a required skill, but after the final experiment, he found that he couldn't. It's not that his talent isn't good, it's his talent. As an Obscurus, his perception itself is much stronger than that of ordinary people. Once the supersensory spell is used, the amount of information he can bear is far beyond that of an ordinary person, and he almost becomes a fool in just a moment. From then on, he would never touch this curse again, at least not until he was absolutely sure. A translucent bee the size of a human head passed through the entrance and flew up from the first floor with trembling wings. The whole body is silvery white and translucent, and something like mist is constantly escaping from the body. Aurelius narrowed his eyes and immediately activated the daily replenished explosion rune. Bang! The translucent bee exploded instantly. Ah! Outside the villa, a pitiful scream sounded. It's the Patronus. Newt said. The patron saint is a strange product summoned by the patron saint spell. Considered to be a symbol of supernatural magical ability. It is an extremely difficult spell to learn, and is also known as the Dark Wizard Identifier. No evil dark wizard can use this spell, because casting the Patronus charm requires extremely positive emotions, which is difficult for a dark wizard polluted by black magic to accomplish. It was also a spell that Aurelius was curious about, but he had never tried it. The main reason was that the Patronus charm was very profound and there were very few magic books recording it. The school doesn't teach it, and it's not sold in bookstores. Although the patron saint can only have a certain restraint effect on a few black magic creatures such as Voldemort bats and Dementors, and is basically useless in ordinary combat, it is still very useful in certain situations. For example, just now, it was a wizard with a bee Patronus who was using his Patronus to survey the terrain. The patron saint is not afraid of death. Although it will dissipate after suffering a huge attack, it can still be summoned next time. Fast, not afraid of death, and able to sense synchronization, this is the best scout. Unfortunately he met Aurelius. The rune, explosion, from Valoran was a bit ungrateful, and Aurelius took advantage of it. In the continent of Valoran, blasting is completely useless as a means of fighting the enemy, but here. The patron saint is obviously not a living entity, but it is closely related to the wizard. The patron saint of explosion can actually implicate its owner. Very good. One more trump card. Go back to the box. Aurelius turned to Nagini and said in a tone that could not be refused. Nagini's combat effectiveness is so low, it's not even a matter of combat experience. Of course, Nagini can choose to fight in the snake form, but those Aurors may still show affection for others, so it's hard to say if they see Nagini in the snake form. Nagini also knew that her stay was purely a burden, so she just pursed her lips and rushed over to him with worry, gave him a hug, and then ran into Aurelius' room. At this time, outside the door. How is it? Travers pulled the Auror aside, grabbed the painful-looking Auror, and cast several spells in succession, but none of them had any effect. Damn it. What kind of magic is this? Travers looked ugly. Theseus hesitated to speak. He is kind, he trusts and respects Dumbledore, but he is also the head of the Auror Office of the Ministry of Magic. But now he is leading people to attack Dumbledore's family, and he has not even ruled out the possibility of killing him. This pained Theseus. He is a warrior, and a warrior who has been awarded a battle hero. It is his bounden duty to obey orders, but he still has humanity. When there is a conflict between vocation and human nature, there will be pain. Damn it. I declare that Aurelius Dumbledore attacked the Auror of the Ministry of Magic. Immediately put him on the list of dark wizards and arrest him. If necessary, he can be executed directly, Travers roared angrily. Yes. The group of Aurors obeyed the order, and each one displayed their own special abilities and launched an attack on Aurelius' villa. Theseus squeezed his wand but did not move it. Fortunately, he had reason to convince himself. He was the director of the Auror Office, he was the commander. Travers glared at him dissatisfiedly, but said nothing. As everyone knows, Theseus did not take action due to personal reasons, but it also won him a chance to live. In the villa, an Auror took the lead and rushed through the door first. Unexpectedly, Aurelius was already waiting. Years of training and fighting gave this Auror rich practical experience. He chanted the spell almost subconsciously. Except you. Avada Kedavra. First come first. Without hesitation at all, he took action, which was the most sinful of the unforgivable curses. In terms of combat experience, Aurelius is not much better than Nagini. But Aurelius knows what it means to strike first, and the best defense is to attack. Only dead enemies are good enemies. The pitiful Auror who didn't even have a name could only feel the vast expanse of green in front of him, and he died silently the next moment. They forget that this is not England and there is no unforgivable curse here. They forget that when people are killed, they die. They also forget that the enemy will not show mercy. They even underestimated their opponent, a man who was born extremely evil and didn't regard black magic as a danger at all, but instead studied it over and over again. Silently, silently. Don't want. Newt's eyes widened, but he was always a step slower. With the death curse, he could only watch the Auror fall. Why kill people? Aurelius' head was full of questions. Are you crazy? They are here to kill me, and I can't fight back. Aurelius even thought it was outrageous. The wizards in this world always seem to have a kind of virgin plot. It's obviously a life and death battle, but look at the magic spells they used. Expelliarmus, petrified everything. What are these? Even the shattered to bones, thunderbolt explosion, and flying sand and rocks, with very deceptive names, can only cause very limited damage to people, and they don't even target the human body at all. Looking at the battle again, in addition to Death Eaters, you have to be an extremely terrifying Death Eater to use the Death Curse as your main attack method. Even Aurelius couldn't think of 5 magic spells that could be used directly to harm or even kill the target. Especially the protagonist Harry Potter, who uses Expelliarmus to force the killing curse, turning the competition of combat experience and skillful fighting into a confrontation. Aurelius could only say that he died unjustly. Even during the Battle of New York more than 9 months ago, Grindelwald did not kill the Aurors who besieged him. Of course, this does not rule out that Grindelwald does have a great love for wizards as a group. He is willing to accommodate any wizard. However, it is a fact that few people die in battles in the magical world. Voldemort, who is regarded as terrifying by countless people, has clear evidence that no more than 20 wizards died at his hands, but he once massacred villages and created an army of vaginas. With so much blood debt, it's no wonder that even after he was thought to be dead, the British wizard was so frightened that he didn't even dare to mention his name. Although this kind of Madonna-looking battle makes people feel ridiculous. But as the saying goes, there must be monsters when things go wrong. There is a very profound reason for this. Emotions. Casting spells requires the cooperation of emotions, and the influence of emotions on people will be amplified under the influence of magic. This is a very important part of the wizard system in this world. Killing each other is undoubtedly a very negative emotion. Therefore, in order to avoid being infected by these negative emotions as much as possible, wizards deliberately avoid and do not study straightforward killing curses. Even in a life and death battle, indirect methods will be used to kill the enemy as much as possible. For example, a thunderbolt explosion detonates objects around the enemy to kill the enemy, such as a blazing flame ignites objects around the target and burns the enemy to death, etc. Or simply use limiting skills to make the enemy lose the ability to resist. For example, Expelliarmus, Petrify All, Upside Down Golden Bell, Frostbite, etc. are all magic spells classified as offensive spells. But Aurelius didn't need to worry about this. No matter how chaotic and evil you are, can you be more chaotic and evil than Obscurus? It can be said that Aurelius is the only wizard in the world who can play the death curse casually without any repercussions. If he was worried that he would be infected by negative emotions, then Aurelius would not react so much, and he was not ignorant. But look at Newt's reaction. Why did you kill? Not, why did you use the killing curse? People can be kind, but they cannot be easily bullied. Then you can choose not to do anything and see if they will show mercy to you. After choking Newt neither softly nor hard, Aurelius jumped forward to avoid the attack of the long whip turned by the green plants next to him, and backhanded its cross-faced attack. One trick can be eaten all over the world. When Aurelius still planned to get this villa, the only curse he could choose was the death curse. There are not many tricks, just easy to use. Just like Aurelius's current opponent, he is very flashy and uses a lot of transformation spells, stun spells, and disarming spells, but they are useless. An iron armor spell blocked it tightly. But when Aurelius took the risk and claimed his life, the boy was so exhausted that he had no chance to resist. There are many obstacles. A third party intervened, and Aurelius instantly felt as if he was in a quagmire, with his movements and spellcasting greatly restricted. Obstacle curse. It is also a restricted type of magic, but it is included in the defensive type of magic. But it is undeniable that this curse brought Aurelius a lot of trouble. Faint, Ali, it's your turn. Call. The surging flames burst out from Aurelius, and a loud phoenix cry resounded from the black flames. Cracking. The black phoenix bathed in flames carried terrifying black flames and instantly created a fire net to protect Aurelius. Obstacles can no longer be obstacles. The flying alley swallowed him unconscious in one mouthful. The pure magic creature made him immune to most spells. Aurelius's backhand was a death curse. With Ali's blessing, the green death curse was as black as ink, and black arcs violently poured into the body of the Auror who was trying to make a sneak attack. That's Phoenix. Newt was stunned. The story Dumbledore told him before suddenly came to his mind. Whenever a Dumbledore is in urgent need, the Phoenix comes. Dark Phoenix. The Aurors who witnessed the death of their companions screamed and fled. Aurelius did not pursue the victory, and more Aurors poured in. Aurelius was a little tired of dealing with more and more curses. Aurelius, who had always insisted that magic spells should be more precious than more expensive ones, was also a little overwhelmed by the endless stream of magic spells. His combat experience is a big issue, especially in the face of one-to-many unequal battles. Although a single life-killing curse is powerful enough, every time it is used, it will force an Auror to run for his life in embarrassment, but the Aurors who cooperate tacitly will always have other people to lend a helping hand, making Aurelius give up the option of pursuing him. Self-defense. Newt's commander. I knew it. I knew it. Travers, who broke in, saw Newt resisting the curse at a glance, and shouted angrily, "Catch them. No one can let go." Seeing the director of the Legal Enforcement Department of the Ministry of Magic, Newt immediately shivered. The winged demon that he had taken the time to release also withdrew it, and with a dull head cast the iron armor curse to resist. Newt is a guy who doesn't put much effort into his work, but Tina is very agile in her actions. The Super Sense spell gives her powerful combat intuition. 2 Aurors had already been knocked down by Tina, but she seemed to have little strength left. She was sweating heavily on her forehead and her bangs were wet. Who are these people? We have to escape, Tina shouted breathlessly. How to escape? Newt held on to the iron armor curse, but with sporadic but tacit cooperation, he hit the iron armor curse with spells one after another. He could only take the time to shout to her. How to escape? Disapparate. Stop it. As soon as he withdraws the iron armor curse, the magic will hit him. Even if he barely manages to apparate, he will be disrupted by the magic of the curse. This is very dangerous. If one is not good, there is a possibility of splitting. Aurelius frowned. He couldn't help but feel angry. If he was willing to part with the villa he had acquired in exchange for half of his net worth, he could set off a powerful fire and turn everything here into ashes. With his control, he can guarantee that none of the Aurors here will survive. But he wasn't sure he could do it without damaging the villa. I can't bear to part with it, it's only $100,000. That's $100,000 in the 1920s. Ouch. A roar came from the room, and Nagini rushed out of the room on Luo Wu. Let's go first, Nagini shouted to Aurelius. Take them away. Aurelius was delighted. Nagini came at the right time. What? Nagini exclaimed, take them away. Who? Newt and Tina. Although they had been together for a few days, Nagini's cold temperament meant that Newt and Tina could not be compared to Aurelius in her eyes. Come on. They are just dragging me down, Aurelius shouted. Nagini gritted her teeth and didn't wait for a reply. Zuowu, who had received the order from Aurelius, grabbed one by one, threw Newt and Tina behind it, swung his beautiful long tail, ran on all fours, and disappeared in an instant. Although Zuowu is a bit mean-spirited sometimes and insists on doing whatever he is not allowed to do, he is still very reliable at critical moments. What a good boy. Aurelius showed his white teeth and looked at the Aurors with evil intentions. Attack. Attack. Don't let him run away. Seeing the magical animal disappearing with the three people, Travers jumped up and down, and the wand in his hand also glowed with green light. Aurelius really wanted Newt to take a good look at this scene. The naive magizoologist has not yet become a warrior. Aurelius instantly decomposed against the green light of the death curse. A hole as wide as a bucket opened in his chest, and Travers' death curse passed through the gap and hit the ceiling behind him. With a ferocious laugh, his legs, torso and finally his arms turned into black mist. This is the first time that he has exposed his true identity in front of so many people in a sober state. Black mist rolled in, swallowing up every inch of the villa. He disappears but is everywhere. Ah! Ah! Miserable screams came and went. One by one, Aurors were sucked into mummies and died in despair, confusion and pain. Quick! Get out! Quick! Get out! Travers shouted in panic. Some Aurors did not hesitate to use their bodies to protect Travers and evacuate, but they themselves were sucked out of life and became one of the corpses. Little did they know that their sacrifice was in vain. Aurelius had no intention of killing Travers. Where can I find such a director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement who will cause trouble for Dumbledore and Grindelwald? After this battle, Aurelius felt that he might not cause trouble to him again in a short time. As for the future, he has long since returned to the Kingdom of Magnesium to stir up trouble, so who will pay attention to him? It would be better to let him go and cause trouble for Dumbledore and Grindelwald. Seeing a group of Aurors fleeing like bereaved dogs, Aurelius reappeared. If Li Huo doesn't use himself, he won't be able to attack in a group? Joke. Obscurious innate abilities are the focus of his development. The magic wand shines, and all dangerous traps in the villa are activated. Without his permission, anyone, including super wizards like Grindelwald and Dumbledore, will shed their skin even if they walk in. Not everyone can escape the crossfire of hundreds of cadavers. Recover as before. The partial destruction of the villa was quickly restored to its original appearance under the spell, and the corpses on the ground were also cleared away by him. The entire villa seemed to have become a forbidden area, where no one set foot. Outside the door, Travers, with an ugly face, looked at the miserable and defeated soldiers around him. Only half of the elite group had escaped, and almost everyone was injured. Several Aurors were stripped of their appearance, with layers of wrinkles and haggard appearance, looking like old people on the verge of death. Dark Wizard. Dark Wizard. This is provocation. This is war. Travers pointed at the villa and yelled. The group of Aurors were silent. They seemed to be law enforcers, but it was also true that they invaded Aurelius' territory. If they want to arrest someone, Aurelius has the right to resist, which is fair. But that's definitely not something Travers would have thought about. Seeing that the furious Travers seemed to want to destroy the villa together, Theseus quickly stopped him. Sir. What are you doing? Travers glared. He had just met Newt in the villa with his own eyes. How kind of attitude could he have towards Newt, his brother? Moreover, the Aurors were all injured, so why did Theseus, Newt's brother, never get in and remain intact? Sir. Look, Theseus urged Travers. Only then did Travers notice that several houses around him were lit with lights, and some muggles who didn't know why were poking their heads in the windows of each house. Damn it. Travers clenched his fist and smashed the wall next to him. At this moment, a column of flashing golden words floated out of the villa, accompanied by Aurelius's warning like a torrent of hell. Aurors and dogs are not allowed inside. Travers was furious. This is a shame. The British Empire's Ministry of Magic is in disgrace that it has not seen in thousands of years. But in the end, under the dissuasion of many Aurors and Theseus, Travers bitterly left. Let's go. The defeated remnants of the army left with difficulty. In the forest not far away, under the natural protective color, a pair of eyes watched their departure. The look in his eyes gave a complicated sigh, full of sadness and loss, and soon disappeared. At the corner of Montmorency Street, Nagini was pacing in place worriedly. Newt and Tina also stood aside with unhappy expressions. Why haven't you come yet? Nagini kept repeating. The big cat Zuwu beside her rubbed her face with his head in a comforting manner. What is this place? Tina asked Newt, who brought them here. Newt looked at the exquisite card in his hand and said absently, Dumbledore gave it to me, he said it was a safe house. In the fire, Aurelius appears. Aurelius. Nagini rushed forward excitedly and hugged him. I'm fine, dear. Aurelius patted her back to comfort her, it's settled. There is a mark left by Aurelius in Zuuwu's head, and he can sense Zuuwu's location and talk to him at any time. Finding them is easy. Newt looked at Aurelius with a complicated expression, vaguely. No, it was obvious alienation. It's not the strangeness we had when we first met a few days ago. It was Aurelius's style of conduct that made Newt so repulsive. But he still resisted the thought of leaving and said to Aurelius, This is a safe house, Dumbledore told me before I left. Aurelius nodded. This is a good thing. It is not easy to go back home for the time being. In fact, there is nothing wrong with going back, but coming here is the purpose of Aurelius. Under the leadership of Newt, they were able to enter an ancient building. It's a very obvious medieval-style building. It looks old on the outside, but it's pretty well maintained on the inside. The first thing you see is a gloomy living room with moving people and a large number of runic characters on some faded and dim tapestries. The large and small earthen jars are a bit messy, and even more messy are the piles of books that almost reach the ceiling. The only light in the room was a crystal ball, inside which a dark cloud was billowing. Aurelius recognized it at a glance. That was himself, or in other words, Obscurus. Could it be that Nicolema had predicted it? Aurelius thought to himself. It is not a secret that Nicolema has the power of prophecy, it can even be said to be an open secret. Many wizards know that, and some even believe that this prophetic ability is given by the Philosopher's Stone, and they pursue the Philosopher's Stone even more obsessively. Oh, good evening. Along with a burst of hurried steps, the real owner of the house appeared from the second floor. It was an old man who was so old that he seemed to be blown out at any moment. His sparse and dry hair hung behind his head, and his eyes were as dim as a corpse. Wrinkles covered her cheeks, and her skin was so white that there was no blood at all. He was wearing a simple gray-white robe, and his swaying body made him look a little creepy. Like a living corpse. Nicolema. A legendary alchemist who was the only one in history who created the Philosopher's Stone, a super wizard who lived for hundreds of years. Albus told me that there might be friends visiting, Nicolema said in his hoarse, breathless voice, but he didn't say there would be so many. With Nicolema's voice, the room suddenly lit up. Tina subconsciously pulled out her wand, but after hearing Nicolema's words, she couldn't help turning her head to look at Newt. Well, Dumbledore didn't tell me there was anyone else here. Mr. Nico Flamel, France's most legendary wizard and alchemist, and the only maker of the Philosopher's Stone. I really didn't expect to see you here. It's such an honor, Aurelius Dumbledore. Aurelius bowed slightly, showing respect. No matter from which aspect, this is a respectable Chong too. He is extremely talented and has accomplished a great miracle that has never been done before or since, the Philosopher's Stone, and used it to refine the elixir of life and achieve eternal life. He has a broad mind and countless disciples. Even when a young boy came to visit, he was never scornful. Instead, he enthusiastically accepted him and worked with him to complete a paper on the 12 uses of dragon's blood. This achievement has no meaning to Nicholas Flamel, who is over 300 years old, but it can bring Dumbledore to a very high level of fame. The most important thing is that he looks at the whole world indifferently, loves but does not interfere. He can choose to die calmly and live gracefully. He is a true hermit and an expert, far from being a recluse like Dumbledore. Ah, Aurelius, your deeds are legendary, and you will be a great person, no doubt. Nicolema looked at him gently, but his cloudy eyes were already difficult to understand, showing too much emotion to people. It seems you know. Aurelius chuckled. As an old man, I am physically handicapped and I only have this ability. Nicolema joked cheerfully about himself. Please take a seat. Nicolema stretched out his hand as if at times the speed. His elixir wasn't that great. Medications prevented his death, but they failed to prevent his aging. 600 years have passed, and his bones have become as fragile as tofu. Aurelius could not accept living like this. Everyone sat down and knew Nicolema's name. Coupled with his weak appearance, few people would regard him as a threat. Even if they had just experienced an attack. I'm sorry for visiting, Mr. Nicolema, but we just suffered an attack. Tina apologized again. It doesn't matter, I saw it. They were too violent and would kill an innocent person for no reason. This is a sad thing. Nicolema shook his head. I'm sorry. What do you mean you saw it? Tina was confused. Aurelius pointed to the crystal ball on the desk inside. Mr. Nicolema is a prophet. I thought you had seen it. Prophet? Merlin, I've heard enough prophecies these days. Tina couldn't help but hold her forehead. Okay, it's getting late, Aurelius said, and then said to Nicolema Flammel, Mr. Flammel, I'm sorry to disturb you so late at night. It's okay, you're too polite, but it's a little late. Nicolema heard what Aurelius meant and said, there are a lot of you, I don't know if we can accommodate you. Nagini handed over Aurelius' box, and of course, Newt also took out his own box. That's enough, we have a place to live. A night of silence. When he woke up the next day and walked out of his suitcase, Aurelius saw Nicolema lying in front of the crystal ball and studying it carefully. Good morning, Mr. Flammel. Oh, Aurelius, Nicolema nodded at him, then turned back and continued to look at the crystal ball. I finally saw some progress. The tomb of Père Lachaise? Aurelius asked. Nicholas Flammel's crystal ball and Grindelwald's snuff pipe are similar in that they can display their own prophecies in the form of pictures. Therefore Aurelius could also see Nicolema's prophecy. Nicolema responded. Yes. What a disaster. It looks like it's going to be lively tonight. Aurelius sighed as he looked at the blazing flames. Huh? Aurelius saw the black man appearing in the crystal ball, and he guessed his identity. Do you have the gift of prophecy? Albus never mentioned it to me, Nicolema asked. Aurelius shook his head. Prophecy is a very magical ability, but unfortunately, I don't have it. I just seem to have seen him. Yosef, a poor child, has lived in the sewers for many years and is in critical condition, Nicolema lamented. Aurelius was confused. He remembered that Yusuf was saved by Newt. Did Yusuf die from parasites in this world? The change in the plot is nothing, but what Aurelius wonders is, could Nicolema predict it? This is much stronger than Grindelwald's prophetic ability that worked sometimes but not always. Your prophecy is so strong. You can know whatever you want to know? Aurelius couldn't help but ask. Nicolema smiled and said, no, of course not. Every prophecy is a revelation from God. I am just the spokesperson of God, helping the speechless God to express his revelation. In fact, as a 600-year-old man, there are some things that do not need to be predicted. Nicolema winked mischievously. Did you guess the feelings? Mr. Nalame, do you know that I am looking for you? Aurelius said. Nicholas Flammel was puzzled. Looking for me? Aurelius breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that he was indeed not omniscient and omnipotent. My companion, she is a blood-cursed orc. I am trying to break this curse, but unfortunately, we cannot find the original data of the blood-cursed. Do you have it here? Aurelius confessed. Nicolema chuckled lightly. You are really special, but you have found the right person. Curses like the blood curse have been around for thousands of years, but many people don't like it very much and think it is useless. Magic. But luckily, I loved collecting these books when I was young. Wait a minute. After Nicholas Flammel finished speaking, he turned around and ran towards the bookshelf in small steps, accompanied by his weak gasping voice. Ha ha ha. Above, the third book, lift up. Aurelius took down a gray-stained book from the bookshelf and looked at Nicolema with some confusion. Your body is already so weak? I am 600 years old, Nicolema said with a gentle breath. But at a distance of less than 2 meters, it would take so long to calm down the breath. What's the point of living like this? Why didn't you make some alchemy tools to help you? This is also Aurelius's biggest question. For things that people cannot do, they are accustomed to looking for tools. Shouldn't alchemists make some alchemical tools to help them live? Ah, what a good idea, but unfortunately, I am already old. My last alchemy work was 400 years ago. Nicolema was very calm and nostalgic. Now I don't even have the strength to hold it up. Nicholas Flammel was referring to the crystal ball. But don't you still have magic? I never rely on magic. These are the last things I can do. Don't you think it's a blessing to be able to jump around with a 600-year-old body? Do not think so. There's something wrong with these wizards' minds. Is it okay to find fault for yourself? Aurelius couldn't get the happiness that Nicolema said at all. Asking these questions is nothing more than satisfying my curiosity. What I really care about is the book in front of me. I flipped through the book and found that I couldn't open it at all. Black magic, as expected. Looking at the magic lines and runes rising on the book, Aurelius knew that this was not a good thing. Blood sacrifice. Only by injecting blood can this book be opened. What a boring and bad taste, Aurelius commented. What do you mean when you say that you wrote a book and that no one should read it? And why do you need the blood? Aurelius had some guesses in his mind, and there was a high probability that if he injected blood, he would be cursed by blood. For these dangerous black magic books, Aurelius never minded using the most vicious way to influence their thoughts. Not every master of black magic is as unaffected as Aurelius. Yingardem Leviosa, the deliberate prolongation caused this simple suspension spell to undergo wonderful changes. Moo, a frightened majestic bison, suddenly appeared and fell to the ground. Fainted. The panicked bison immediately fell to the ground, shaking the floor of the room. Oh! Merlin's pants. Nicolema patted his chest, as if he was frightened. This incorrect usage of the levitation spell was also something Aurelius had tried before when he was bored. But he developed a wonderful use for it. Since then, Aurelius has never bought beef for Zuowu. Don't be nervous, I'm just lending you some blood. Aurelius turned a cow hair into a dagger and cut the bison's skin, and blood immediately flowed out. There was no waste. He waved his wand, and the dripping blood instantly gathered upwards against gravity to form a line of blood, and was injected into the magic circle on the book. Visible to the naked eye, the originally black book turned red. This surprised Aurelius. I thought I would be directly cast a blood curse. No, it's just a lock, and it's not very powerful. If knows the trick, you can actually use magic to unlock it, Nicolema explained. Stealing work. Then this is not Aurelius' specialty. After all, his exposure to magic is too short, and he is actually quite partial. Many conventional curse theories are unclear, let alone tips. The tips for unlocking such an ancient lock are unheard of. With the contribution of the bison, the book shows its true colors. On the red cover, the runes disappeared, but the title of the book was revealed. Blood magic. A very ancient and partial type of magic that was popular for a period of time, probably more than 1,000 years ago. This kind of magic uses blood as a sacrifice to achieve various magical effects. When I was young, in order to pursue the magic stone, I collected a large amount of ancient magic, and this book was also found at that time. Nicolema recalled the past. The blood curse is blood magic. Well, it makes sense. Aurelius couldn't help but smile. Many wizards blindly pursue ancient magic, believing that ancient magic is powerful and mysterious, but Aurelius is not enthusiastic about it. People yearn for ancient magic because ancient magic has been lost. Today's wizards can only imagine ancient magic from a few words and some rumors that cannot be distinguished between true and false. Instead of being obsessed with ancient magic that is castles in the air, it is better to understand modern magic first. No, blood curse is also a very special kind of blood magic. Nicolema was not self-conscious, he generously shared his knowledge with Aurelius. I have always believed that blood curses should be classified as curses in modern magic, and may even be the origin of curses. Aurelius frowned. This view was interesting. However, his understanding of the blood curse was extremely limited, so he did not express his opinion. Instead, he found the blood curse chapter from the book. Just like his thoughts, there is not only one kind of blood curse, nor can it only curse the target and his descendants to turn into beasts. In Blood Magic, there is a detailed description of the blood curse. The essence of the blood curse is to use the blood of the caster as a sacrifice, the blood of the person being cast as the medium, and something called a curse spirit. Curse rituals performed with special sacrifices. The contents of curses vary, but their common features are heritability and non-immediate nature, which means they are slow to take effect. As a curse caster, he will undoubtedly die when his blood dries out after the ceremony, but the cursed person can still live for a few years or even 10 decades. If the cursed person is older, the curse may not take effect until he or she dies. No wonder no one uses it and it is now lost. The contents of the blood curse are many and strange, but many of the effects look familiar to Aurelius. Falling into eternal sleep. Becoming an eternal statue. Isn't this an enhanced version of falling unconscious and being petrified? Aurelius couldn't help but think. This is good news. Aurelius had an immature theory, the theory of magical transformation. He believes that there is no necessary connection between magic effects and spell casting methods, and they can be transformed into each other. The death curse trap is one of his achievements. Now seeing the familiar magical effects of blood curse, this is another strong support. If the sleeping object falls to the ground in a coma, and the statues are all petrified, then this animal transformation. Aurelius narrowed his eyes, and a magical name came to his mind, animagus. Animagus is a form of transfiguration. It can be hailed as the jewel in the crown of transfiguration. The master of transfiguration may not be an animagus, but all animagus can be called the master of transfiguration. This magic is known for its extremely high risk, extremely long practice time, and extreme need for luck. Although it has a great name, this demon is actually useless. Very few wizards are willing to learn it. Compared with the rigorous learning requirements and risks taken, the rewards it brings are very unequal. Just being able to turn into an ordinary animal. Not only can you not cast spells, but you will also be affected by animal nature. In animal form, it will do many things that are impossible or even disgusting for humans. And these behaviors all come from animal instincts. From this point of view, Animagus is indeed very similar to the blood curse orcs. The difference is that it is difficult for a skilled Animagus to forget that he is a human being in his beast form for a long time, while a blood-cursed orc has a more powerful beast form or even a beast form without magical creatures. So, what is the fundamental reason for this difference? After reading the book carefully, Aurelius finally saw something bright. He noticed a very special sacrifice when the blood curse or curse was cast. Animal. The blood curse orc's curse requires a beast as an additional spell spirit. Moreover, it is clearly written in the book that the cursed person will gain the ability to transform into this kind of animal after the curse takes effect. And their descendants will also gain the ability to become similar to animals. As for why the cursed person and his descendants may turn into different types of animals, the book does not explain the reason. But that's enough. Aurelius felt that as long as he cracked the blood curse and clearly understood the role of each part, he would be able to figure out Nagini's current situation. Although he may still have no solution, at least he can understand Nagini's pathology, instead of making random guesses like today. This is a staged victory. It seems to be helpful to you. Nicolema was also very happy when she saw the smile on Aurelius's face. Very useful. Mr. Flammel, can you lend me this book for a while? Aurelius made his request. Of course, it's just gathering dust here. Maybe in your hands, it can save many people. Aurelius felt relieved. Thank you very much for your generosity. As a reward. Aurelius paused and looked at Yi, who was unconscious on the ground. I'll treat you to a roast, bandit. Nicholas Flammel looked at the bison whose fate was decided lightly, and then at Aurelius. He hadn't met such an interesting young man in a long time. Think about the last time. Well, it was probably more than 20 years ago when Albus found him unexpectedly. Oops, it's amazing. I don't want to miss it. That presumptuous boy back then is now a famous wizard all over the world. Time flies so fast. Shame. This is a shame to the British Ministry of Magic. It is a shame to all Aurors. In the French Ministry of Magic, Travers, who was defeated with a group of remaining soldiers, roared angrily. Theseus lowered his head and leaned against the wall, silently. As the head of the Auror office, he acted as if he had no authority. The name sounds nice, war hero, but that is a Muggle war hero. He earned this title for protecting many Muggles. Therefore, his war hero is very useful among wizards who are pro-Muggles, but it is more like an ironic title among wizards who ignore or even hate Muggles. Other than that, it was hard for him to find a good colleague. Many people, including Theseus himself, admitted that Travers was a very capable commander. But at the same time, Theseus was also very depressed. As a commander, he was too controlling and acted too tough. Obviously he is the direct superior of Auror, but Travers always oversteps his authority. Theseus did not approve of the attack on Aurelius himself. Although he chose to side with the Ministry of Magic, he was kind-hearted and unwilling to sacrifice an innocent person because of the conflict between the Ministry of Magic and Grindelwald. Now the operation failed, more than one-third of the Auror action team died, and another third suffered varying degrees of trauma. The British Ministry of Magic's elite Aurors all came to such an end. Travers's anger was understandable, but he disagreed. Seeing his fiancée's confused eyes, Theseus could only smile bitterly and shook his head gently. This was not the place for the young couple to talk. The sight of Newt, who should not be in France, at Aurelius' residence was very detrimental to Theseus. Although he is upright and kind, he is not a fool. He does not want to be used as a punching bag, let alone take the blame. However, his fears eventually came true. Travers's vicious look made Theseus look up unconsciously. Theseus, I need an explanation. Why did Newt's commander, a man who was banned, appear in Paris, France? Theseus frowned and said, Sir, although we are brothers, Newt is an adult after all. I won't let me know everything he wants to do. You don't know. Travers laughed angrily. No one knows. He may have discovered some precious magical animals, or he may have learned where magical animals are illegally sold, just like he showed up in New York last year. So he showed up in Paris, at our target's home? He even saw us not only not helping, but not stopping, but actually helping the target launch an attack on the Aurors. Travers' voice became louder and louder, and in the end, almost questioning. Theseus frowned, and his tone was not that good. Please pay attention to your tone, Chief Travers, I am not your prisoner. You'll be there soon. Capture Theseus. What? Lita exclaimed, standing in front of Theseus. Why? Even if Newt violates the ban and hinders the action, what does it have to do with Theseus? Why? Because he was treated passively during the operation. As the director of the Auror office and the leader of this operation, he was afraid of death and never entered the scene. I have reason to suspect that all this is a trap, targeting our Auror operation. Trap. Theseus is suspected of leaking secrets and betraying. Is this reason enough? Miss Lestrange. Travers looked at the two of them coldly. Not enough. You don't have the right to arrest the master of the Auror office. This requires the minister's personal approval. Rita was unmoved. As the only daughter of the Lestrange family, Lita is by no means ordinary, and she has full confidence in confronting a director of magical law enforcement. You. Travers looked at her sinisterly, but Lita didn't take a step back. The other Aurors looked at each other, but no one came forward. As Rita said, wanting to arrest the director of the Auror office is a decision that only the Minister of Magic is qualified to make. Even though Travers is now the most popular person in the Ministry of Magic, it is not a problem to say that he is half the Minister of Magic, but after all, he is only half, and he is not the Minister of Magic yet. Very good. Then I hope you can be careful and don't let me catch you. Miss Lestrange, you should know that as the director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, I have the right to arrest anyone in an emergency. All it cost was a hearing. Travers walked away. As Travers left, the tense atmosphere present slowly dissipated. Lita, thank you. Theseus sat on the chair depressedly. I am your fiancé. Rita shook her head, saying there was no need to thank her, but she couldn't help but ask. Theseus, what happened? Why don't I know anything? There were many people sent by the British Ministry of Magic, but not everyone participated in last night's action. Since this operation is extremely important in the eyes of Travers, as long as Aurelius is killed, Grindelwald's plan can be severely damaged. Travers was well aware of Grindelwald's vast power and believed that there must be an undercover agent of the other party on his side, so the level of confidentiality was extremely high. On the surface, they're here to help the French Ministry of Magic provide clues and analyze the Grindelwald witch party. This is also the purpose that Rita knows. Out of the professional ethics of an Auror, Theseus perfectly implemented the confidentiality regulations and did not even tell his fiancée. But who would have thought that Aurelius's strength exceeded their imagination? Originally, the large number of manpower was used to hinder the support of the Wiccan party, but in the end, it was disabled by Aurelius alone. Is he really that strong? Rita was extremely surprised. There were dozens of well-trained Aurors. He often resorted to killing curses, and more than 5 people were killed by the killing curses. Theseus felt terrible just thinking about it. Theseus had participated in a real war, and he knew what it was like to kill the enemy on the battlefield. But in the magical world, Aurelius' behavior was too outrageous. Not only Newt found it hard to accept, but Theseus also found it incredible. In the end, it can only be attributed to Aurelius being a dabbler and not knowing the consequences of doing so. This is not our plan at all. Before the action, I emphasized several times that we should not change the plan at will, but he still felt that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Theseus said angrily, after learning that Grindelwald also found Aurelius, and Travers was afraid that something would change later. We didn't have time to formulate a better action plan, and we didn't find out more information. You shouldn't do this, Rita said quietly after listening to Theseus's story. I know that I have clearly stated my opposition to this action several times. A group of Aurors who want to protect the people want to kill an innocent person. I cannot accept it, I cannot understand it, and I cannot let it go. Rita wanted to say that she didn't mean it, but seeing Theseus look, she finally made no further statement. The saddest thing is that the killing has not yet been completed. I can already imagine the subsequent script. The Dark Wizard attacked and killed more than a dozen Aurors of the British Ministry of Magic, and at the same time caused more than 10 Aurors to suffer varying degrees of injuries. The Ministry of Magic is fully searching for Aurelius Dumbledore and has put a reward on his head from now on. Lita showed a disdainful smile. Maybe it's more than that. Theseus shook his head. There is an evil dark wizard in the Dumbledore family. This is an excuse to send it to Travers. He will go to Dumbledore to cause trouble and force. He even blackmailed Dumbledore to take action. Either to eliminate Grindelwald in the Ministry of Magic will clarify that the accusation against Aurelius was a misunderstanding, or to go to the cleanup day and Dumbledore personally send Aurelius to the Ministry of Magic. Well, it's his style. Rita nodded in agreement. Newt, what on earth are you doing? Theseus' head hurt when he thought of his careless brother. He thinks he is already a good brother, always thinking about Newt. Helped him get into the Ministry of Magic, Newt committed suicide and was sent to the House Elf Resettlement Office. Knowing that he loved magical animals and had extensive research on them, Theseus introduced him to August Worm from Obscurial books. After learning that he had been banned due to the New York incident, he finally got a chance to return to the Ministry of Magic to make atonement, but he failed. You said you, screw it up. Why do you have to sneak to Paris and get together with Aurelius? Aren't you unwilling to look for Aurelius? Newt, you said you didn't have a choice, but what you did has already made a choice. Theseus had a complicated expression. Rita's expression was also solemn, but she seemed to have some ideas of her own. Where Grindelwald fell. Oh. Are the British Aurors so impatient? What will be the result? Grindelwald was quite interested. Vita said. According to our intelligence, the British Aurors suffered heavy losses. Nearly 2/3 of them lost their combat effectiveness, and half of them were corpses. It's very straightforward. I like his style. What about others? His whereabouts are unknown, but there is a high probability that he is fine. He has a magical creature that seems to be able to apparate without restriction. I have asked experts for advice, and there should be conclusive news soon. Vita just finished speaking. A phantom figure appeared at the door of the room. It was none other than Gunnar Grimson, a hunter of magical animals who had disappeared for several days. That is a Zhou Wu, a very rare magical animal from China. It is called the most kind magical animal, because it does not eat any raw meat. It hates the smell of blood even more than fruits. It has a special way of moving. Able to reach thousands of miles away in an instant, Grimson said. His identity is still a secret, but the level of secrecy has dropped a lot. At least Vita and other senior members of the Wu Kui party are qualified to know his existence. Even allies such as Aurelius and Sotero knew of him, directly or indirectly. No wonder he is so courageous. With the power of such magical animals, if he wants to leave, few people can stop him. Grindelwald nodded and asked him, is there any news? Grimson shook his head. No, the time is too short and it will be difficult for us to penetrate. Don't worry, we still have a lot of preparation work that hasn't started yet. This is your most important work at the moment. If you can't confirm it, you have to give up this plan. The two Riddlers were talking, and Vita on the side had no idea what they were talking about. Of course, Vita wouldn't ask. Although she is in charge of secrets and intelligence, not everything Grindelwald will tell her. Vita, are you ready for tonight's rally? Grindelwald asked. It's ready. The British and French Aurors are also aware of it. Very good, then I think we can set off. Villa Aurelius. McGonagall and Aberforth came here, and their intelligence was limited. The information Dumbledore gave them was the address of the hotel, but they only got the information that Aurelius checked out and left. If McGonagall hadn't possessed a tracking spell that was as good as Newt's, they really wouldn't have been able to find him. A lot of people died in a battle. McGonagall couldn't help but tighten his wand. Aberforth scowled, knowing that this was why his annoying brother had sent them to Paris. Want to go in? No. Aberforth stopped him. You will be beaten into a sieve before you even walk in. What? Death curse, I have never seen such magic. This house is full of fatal death curse, there may be hundreds of them. Aberforth calmly looked at the silent villa in front of him. Aurelius, the magic trap is not just for sneak attacks, it is more like a deterrent to prevent others from entering. Any experienced wizard should be able to sense the danger. Although Aberforth's grades in school were very poor, he was a genius like Harry Potter. He was weak in theory, but in practice he had unparalleled talent. Harry Potter is still growing up in the story, but Aberforth, now in his 40s, is at the peak of his powers as a wizard. The trap here cannot be hidden from him. It looks like he's fine. That's the best news. Let's go. Where to go? The tomb of Père Lachaise. Montmorency Corner, Nicolema Safe House. You want to leave? Aurelius put down the blood magic in his hand and looked up at Newt. Yes, your safety has been guaranteed, and I have completed the task assigned to me by Dumbledore. My smuggling out of the country has been discovered. If I cannot rush back to the UK immediately and the Ministry of Magic has evidence, I will be imprisoned. From Azkaban, Newt said. Aurelius's eyes made Newt dodge a little. Aurelius chuckled. If you can, I suggest you stay a little longer today, Otherwise, I think you may regret it for the rest of your life. What? Newt was confused. Tonight there is Grindelwald's speech and a gathering of his followers at the tomb of Père Lachaise. I suggest you go and see it. Aurelius said casually. Why? I am not a fan of Grindelwald, let alone his follower. I have no interest in his speech, Newt said disgustedly. Whenever Grindelwald is mentioned, Newt resists from the bottom of his heart. He hates Grindelwald? No, he agrees with hating the Ministry of Magic. He only loves his magical animals and has little interest in others, but there are always people asking him to believe this or that, which only arouses his disgust. Going to the rally does not mean that you are his suitor. This is a well-intentioned piece of advice. After saying that, Aurelius said nothing more. He could see clearly that there was a high probability that Lita Lestrange would die today. This is not the end of the world line, but decided from the beginning. Unless Aurelius has influenced the plot to change Lita's coming to France, as long as she comes, she will definitely appear at tonight's gathering. This was originally a trap set by Grindelwald for them. It's such a big gathering, with tens of thousands of people gathering, and you want to hide it? This is impossible in itself. It's better to lay it out in a big way and use the trick to hit them hard. As long as the Aurors go, they are destined to suffer heavy casualties. They can't even deal with Aurelius, who has a single method and lacks combat experience, let alone Grindelwald, who has a large number of elite wizards to help him. At this point, it still does not mean that Lita Lestrange will die. What really made her die was that as the sole heir of the French Lestrange family, she ultimately refused Grindelwald's solicitation. Before that, the grievances and hatreds between her and her family would eventually point to the tomb of Père Lachaise, which was originally a bait. If she agreed to Grindelwald's solicitation, then Grindelwald could keep her, but she refused, which would fill her own grave with the last shovelful of soil. Will she agree? Probably not. She should have thought through the consequences when she refused. Rita must die, but her death is not because of who wants her to die, but because of the knots that tie her tightly to death. The only effect of her death is to make Theseus firmly oppose Grindelwald and make Newt, who was bent on evading, become a staunch warrior. That's all. This woman has been treated as a tool from the beginning, from birth to death. I have to say, poor man. Out of pity for a familiar person he had never met, Aurelius thoughtfully gave Newt advice so that he would not lose the chance to see the person he once loved for the last time. Do you think he will go at night? Nagini asked curiously, watching Newt and Tina leave with their suitcases. Who knows, it doesn't matter whether he goes or not. The world is very big, and the earth will continue to rotate without anyone. No one is irreplaceable. Aurelius smiled and continued to look at his hands. Book of. Nicolema was a little emotional. You really look like a prophet. Any worries and uneasiness come from lack of preparation. I will try my best to make all the preparations before unexpected situations really arise. Nicolema's cloudy eyes gave him a meaningful look. Unexpected circumstances? Does it also include exposure to the wizarding world in the future? Tomb of Père Lachaise. A man kneels before a statue, clasping his hands in prayer. The dark skin cannot be seen clearly in the dim environment. Behind him, Rita came slowly, until you get behind him. Yusuf. Rita called softly. Yusuf Kama opened his eyes and looked at Rita's strange yet familiar face. They are similar in 3 ways, except that Yusuf is a pure black race, while Rita's skin is much fairer than him, and her eyebrows are more European. My little sister. Yusuf stood up with difficulty. He looked very weak, as if he might die at any time. Rita nodded silently. Is it really you? Yusuf was still asking. Lita Lestrange. Lita said her name. Yusuf barely showed a smile on his weak face. It's really you. You look bad. Lita approached him. Are you here to help me? Yusuf looked at her expectantly, but then he smiled bitterly. I'm so confused, I'm your brother. After all, he is not your brother. How could you want to help? I killed him. He is not. What's not? Who's not? Aurelius, our credence. Lita looked at her brother, whom she had never met, with complicated eyes. No? Then who is? Do you really want to tell me that he is Dumbledore's son? Yusuf laughed angrily. Lita, you saw that I am already terminally ill. Unbreakable vow is killing me. He is too strong. Dozens of Aurors in the UK can do nothing to him. He deserves the love of that devilish man. I am so ill that I can no longer kill him. You don't need to guard me like this anymore. I don't. Lita said with a strong voice. You don't know what happened, you don't know the whole thing. Wow. It's so lively. A majestic beast appeared in the cemetery almost in a flash, with a man and a woman riding on it. The black smart windbreaker and riding boots made him look like a princess who had just saved the princess. Knight. It's you. Yusuf pulled out his wand and pointed at Aurelius. No. Yusuf. Rita shouted hurriedly. Why is Aurelius here? Of course he is here to keep an appointment. The gathering was not just about listening to Grindelwald's speech. As an invitee, even if Aurelius didn't care much about the other content, he still came here early out of politeness. Yusuf changed his face crazily, and finally dropped his arms feebly. Can't beat it. Can't beat it at all. You should be lucky that you didn't choose to take action. Aurelius said. He was just describing the facts. I made an unbreakable vow to kill the one he loved, and now I have found it, but I can't do anything. Yusuf fell to the ground helplessly. The oath is taking away my life. If you are referring to your current situation, I suggest you see a doctor instead of taking it as an oath. Aurelius said speechlessly. He didn't expect wizards in the magical world to be so superstitious and obsessed. Since wizards don't know enough about magic itself, most of them are in a state of knowing what it is and not knowing why. Therefore, no matter what the wizard encounters, he will attribute it to magic. The key point is that there are many people like this. Nowadays, there are a large number of people who are crazy and superstitious about prophecies, and in the future there will be even more superstitious people who believe that a baby Harry Potter can kill Voldemort, and they are even pursuing him as the savior. So did Yusuf. He had obviously been living as a rat in the sewers for a long time and was simply infested by parasites, but he transformed himself, thinking that the oath was devouring his life as a punishment for not completing the oath. Are you mocking me? The prophesied warriors charged desperately, but you, the little crow, spread your wings and fly high from the deep sea. It turns out that the true meaning of this prophecy is not that the warriors returned to their country with revenge, but the warriors' revenge failed, and the little crow returned there. Yusuf was a little stunned. Aurelius was a little speechless. There were 10,000 explanations for that kind of specious prophecy, and he had to answer it by himself. Do you feel so good about yourself? May I ask who you are? As an ancient prophet who is famous all over the world, why would Dodonas make a prophecy for you, a wizard who is completely unremarkable except for his skin color, that will only be fulfilled after dozens or hundreds of years? Aurelius completely ignored Yusuf and walked inside with Zuowu and Nagini. Unexpectedly, Rita suddenly stopped him. Mr. Dumbledore, are you going to the assembly? Aurelius stopped and turned to look at her. Is there any problem? Miss Lestrange. I suggest you not to go. It is very dangerous and irrational. Aurelius smiled. Last night, I suffered an unprovoked attack at home. More than 30 elite wizards broke into my house. Until now, I can't go home. What do you think? Is it more dangerous to attend a rally with tens of thousands of people than this? Sincere advice. You don't need to be sarcastic. I was once a student of Professor Dumbledore, and so was my fiancé. This is a reminder for Professor Dumbledore's sake. Lita said expressionlessly. Aurelius smiled. Then I will give you a sincere suggestion. You'd better turn around and go home now and attend the rally. You are much more dangerous than me. As Grindelwald's ally, Grindelwald will not take action against him. Although allies are meant for backstabbing, it must be done when the ally is weak. Is Aurelius weak now that he is homeless? Not always. On the contrary, after experiencing the baptism of a siege, Aurelius gained a lot more combat experience and was now in his best condition so far. Grindelwald would not take action against him, and those orders were not his targets. So what could be the danger? Rita is the really dangerous woman. She is now walking step by step towards the abyss that has been waiting for her in ignorance. Mr. Dumbledore, Mr. Grindelwald has kept me waiting for a long time. A man wearing a suit and leather shoes, in standard witchcraft attire came out. He looks very inconspicuous, but he has an extremely eye-catching forked tongue. Abernathy. Thank you Mr. Grindelwald for the invitation, please. Aurelius raised his hand. Please. Abernathy didn't even look at the other two. But suddenly, Yusuf behind him suddenly spoke. Stop. What are you doing? Yusuf. Rita picked him up and shouted sternly. He's here. He's here. Yusuf murmured like a man possessed, and his tightly covered arms were slowly revealed. Threads composed of countless magic powers surrounded his wrist, and it was hot. What is this? Rita asked in surprise. I don't know, Yusuf said in fear. He felt like he was going to die. This was a sign. Wizards also have limited knowledge of the unbreakable vow. No one would swear casually for fun, let alone swear on their own lives. Faced with the sudden signs, he seemed very panicked. Huh? Aurelius stopped and turned to look at his arm. Aurelius only heard the name of the unbreakable oath and did not understand its principles. He didn't know what was going on with Yusuf, but he at least knew this wasn't normal. When something goes wrong, there must be a monster. Aurelius often said this, and he believed it. So where is this demon? Let's go. Aurelius looked as usual, and Abernathy greeted him with a smile, and the two of them walked inside. I don't care about Yusuf's crazy talk. As Grindelwald's confidant, how could Abernathy abandon Aurelius, who Grindelwald had repeatedly warned him to treat with caution, and instead care about a lunatic who was about to die? What happened? Nagini knew Aurelius too well, and she was keenly aware that Aurelius seemed to be avoiding something. It's so interesting. Aurelius couldn't help but smile. Sometimes people really can't set flags randomly. I just told Nicolema that nothing is beyond my control and something unexpected happened, Aurelius said in front of the Riddler. It wasn't that his Dumbledore family bloodline had awakened, but that he couldn't go into too much detail at this time. Please. Looking at the tomb door slowly opening in front of him, Aurelius felt a little embarrassed. Whose good family holds a meeting in a tomb? Grindelwald's ideas are also very unique. The hall used for gatherings and speeches was actually disguised as a tomb, and it was actually underneath the tomb. Can't these wizards have normal brain circuits? Cursing in his heart, Aurelius took Nagini and Zuowu, who had been cursed and turned into the size of a kitten, into the tomb passage. The road is not long, only about 20 or 30 meters. Suddenly see the light. The high ceiling of the hall is made of marble, with magic lamps suspended above it, illuminating the entire venue. Walking 2 steps forward, you will find the stepped venue. Many participating wizards have already arrived, in groups of 3 and 2, chatting with acquaintances. The Wu Kui party stood ready, guarding the 8 passages leading in and out of the venue, looking around with pairs of sharp eyes, acting as human surveillance. Mr. Grindelwald is preparing a speech for the evening. Then we won't bother you. Aurelius was very considerate. Thank you for your understanding. We have prepared a dedicated VIP lounge for you. Please come with me. Walk and look. Hey, there are a lot of acquaintances here tonight. Hello, Mr. Dumbledore. Hello, Mr. Dumbledore. Hello. A group of inexplicable people came over to say hello to Aurelius. The vast majority of them are nobles from the wizarding world in various European countries. These pure-blood nobles are sometimes slow, but sometimes they are very sharp. In the past few months, Aurelius's footprints have only been limited to the Portuguese Ministry of Magic and the French Ministry of Magic, but his identity as Dumbledore has been spread to more distant places. There are countless people who follow the trend. They were not after Aurelius, but for his cheap master, the great Dumbledore. Dumbledore and Grindelwald are currently polar opposites in the wizarding world. Grindelwald needs followers and it is not difficult to please him, but Dumbledore is a bit more difficult. Taught in a school, these pure-blood nobles couldn't find an excuse even if they wanted to curry favor. After all, he is a pure-blood noble, showing off his identity. Too explicit dog-licking behavior is still not allowed. But with the appearance of Aurelius, these pure-blood nobles found a breakthrough. There are even rumors that Aurelius is the son of Dumbledore, and there are quite a few people who believe it. The main reason is that Aberforth keeps a low profile. Almost no one knows that Aberforth is the younger brother of Albus Dumbledore. Finally, there is a chance to establish a relationship with Dumbledore. Will these people let it pass? These days, in fact, such interruptions have never been less, even though Aurelius has tried his best to explain it in a simple and profound way. But since he appeared in public today, he had expected such an encounter. It was just a sickening moment of insincerity and coercion. Tonight's gathering gathered European celebrities, and Mr. Dumbledore's presence was even more impressive. Abernathy flattered him at the right time. Aurelius smiled and patted his arm. Mr. Abernathy, you are so polite. I would be proud if you said that. Surrounded by a group of people, Abernathy led them into a separate room. The layout is quite luxurious. There is a faint fragrance as soon as you enter the door. 2 girls in cool clothes are carrying flower baskets. From time to time, they grab a petal from the flower basket and throw it out with their white gloves. The elegant petals fall in the air with the wind and disperse like falling sand, making the fragrance stronger. The huge floor-to-ceiling windows provide an unobstructed view of the venue below. A luxurious sofa is placed in front of the window. On the ancient table, there are Chinese teapots and tea bowls that are incompatible with the surrounding European style. Get out. Abernathy left the room with the 2 little girls. Mr. Dumbledore, Miss Nagini, please excuse me. Aurelius nodded and watched Abernathy carefully close the door. It's so comfortable. Good things are good things. The only drawback of this expensive thing is that it's expensive. Aurelius couldn't help but stretched out comfortably. I don't think so. It's so squishy. It feels like it's not stable when I'm sitting on it, as if I might fall off at any time, Nagini muttered. It seems that I really have to speed up my research. If you turn into a snake and sleep in a cage like this again, I'm afraid you won't even be able to sleep on a hard board. Aurelius laughed. Nagini gave him a beautiful eye roll. Can you tell me now? What did you discover just now? I'm not sure, it's just a guess, Aurelius said softly. It's rare to see you say that. Nagini smiled. It's normal. I'm not a god. I can't predict everything. I'm just used to preparing more backups. Aurelius smiled. This topic ends here. Aurelius generally would not express an opinion if he was not sure of it. Nagini also knew Aurelius's habits, so it was different. There are so many believers in Grindelwald. Nagini looked at the bustling crowd below and couldn't help but sigh. The more you get, but not this many. At least half of the people here sneered at his tricks, but for various interests, they came here and became Grindelwald's believers. Aurelius sees the truth. Grindelwald is just a person they pushed out to pursue their interests. That is, obtain more resource space in the world. The Earth as a whole is also the largest area currently explored by Muggles and wizards. Resources within this limited area are also limited. Obtaining more resources is the innate desire of human beings as biological creatures. For a long time in the past, the resources on the Earth were abundant, enough to meet the needs of different groups of Muggles and wizards. But as time went by, Muggles began to industrialize, and the rapid growth in productivity also represented an increase in required resources. The wizarding world had been peaceful for a long time, and the population was also increasing, so did the resources required. Muggles do not know the existence of wizards. They think they control all the resources in the world, so they expand outward. Aerospace was born. But some wizards have their sights set on Muggles. They believed that Muggles were weak and unworthy of such huge resources. This is exactly what Grindelwald stands for, and why these wizards support him. But no matter what the reason is, these wizards support Grindelwald. Besides those who support Grindelwald, there are also people with ulterior motives. Roland Cathaway, the former director of the Legal Enforcement Department of the Polish Ministry of Magic, and Dennis Google, a French alchemist, are all senior officials and celebrities in the Ministry of Magic from various countries. Do you think they will be Grindelwald's followers? Aurelius was very fond of these pure-blood nobles. He didn't know them before, but since landing in Europe, Aurelius has consciously begun to collect information about these people. At least the names and identities can match. This information is useful among the Ministry of Magic in various countries. Aurelius suddenly sat up straight, and he saw an acquaintance, Paul Herman. Paul, who was wearing a woolen coat, was among a dozen people in the group. Those people looked very capable, and most likely, they were Aurors. What is he here for? Aurelius frowned and thought. No matter how small the Portuguese Ministry of Magic is, it will not allow the Minister of Magic to go to such a dangerous place to personally detect information. As for actually attending the rally, that's even more impossible. If there is one Ministry of Magic in the world that is least likely to flatter Grindelwald, it is the Portuguese Magic County. There is no pure-blood noble in the Portuguese Ministry of Magic, its population is sparse, and its resources are excessive. 1,000 people guard the resources of a large sea area, and they will not resonate with Grindelwald's proposition. This is a typical wallflower Ministry of Magic. They themselves have no opinions and cannot have opinions. Faced with the conflict between Grindelwald and the Ministry of Magic of other countries, the Portuguese Ministry of Magic should sit firmly on the diautai. It's really strange, Aurelius shook his head and looked at the people around Paul. Obviously, these people are centered on Paul and are his bodyguards and the like. But clearly not an Auror. It is easy to find that when Aurors are in groups, they will instinctively form a special standing layout, with 3 groups in groups, and the 3 groups further cooperate. This is a habit left over from special training among Aurors. Aurelius saw more than 10 groups of such trinity positions in the venue below. Paul's bodyguards did not do this. Instead, they protected him in the middle and ensured that they could act as human shields for him as soon as possible. This was an unlikely course of action for an Auror to choose. It's enough to knock them unconscious or turn them all to stone. What if it's a life-killing curse? Being an Auror is just a job. A few $100s a month is really not worth risking your life. These people in Paul are more like the kings of death. How outrageous. Paul, a muggle-born minister of magic, where did he come from? Hey. It's Newt. Is he really here? Nagini suddenly patted Aurelius' arm. Aurelius looked around, not just Newt. There were two people beside him, a man and a woman, but there was no sign of Tina. Are we breaking up again? Aurelius couldn't help but laugh. Not many people could stand Newt's temper. Newt is smart and knowledgeable, but he hates the world. He hates the secular human world and places his affection on magical animals. If he had to make an analogy, Aurelius felt that Newt and Kudo had the same virtues. One forgets everything when it comes to reasoning, and the other ignores everything when it comes to magical animals. They both belong to each other and are in love with each other, and they all love beauties with high martial arts value. But the pretentiousness made the audience anxious for them. As far as Aurelius knows, Newt and Tina have not really gotten together after 8 or 9 years, and Kudo Shinichi has been inked for thousands of episodes. Moreover, Newt faced even worse situations. Tina seems to have a boyfriend now, an Auror. But don't worry that they won't be able to achieve positive results. Because decades later, Newt and Tina's grandson, a bad boy whose name was only known but whose identity was unknown, abducted Luna, whom countless fans longed for. There must be hundreds of people from the Ministry of Magic from various countries, and you can still recognize them. Aurelius felt a little emotional about Grindelwald's card. A gathering, knowing that there is a trap, still allows the Ministry of Magic of various countries to send a large number of manpower to investigate. It is not an exaggeration to say that the wind and cranes are roaring, and the grass and trees are all at war. Of course, it's also possible that Aurelius thought these Ministry of Magic were too smart, and maybe they really didn't expect there to be a trap. But there are certainly not many such fools. Among the people Aurelius didn't recognize, Aberforth and McGonagall also came. Aberforth was wearing a woolen coat and a thick top hat covering most of his face. It looked like he was covering his ears and stealing his bell. The hat couldn't cover his face at all. But this is precisely the easiest way to get lost in the crowd at the rally. Because many people do this. Aberforth, did you see that? McGonagall was a little anxious. Aberforth shook his head. The photos in his hand were soaked with sweat, but Aurelius was still nowhere to be found. Maybe we arrived too late and he has already defected to Grindelwald, Aberforth said softly. He's Dumbledore. How could he do this? McGonagall asked urgently. I don't know. Maybe it's because of Grindelwald's threat. Maybe it's Grindelwald's inducement. Maybe it's not as bad as I thought. Aberforth shook his head, as if he wanted to get rid of those bad thoughts. Inducement? What inducement can Grindelwald use to induce him? The possibility of survival, Aberforth said quietly. Abernathy, has he arrived? Grindelwald leaned on the sofa and closed his eyes to rest. There was a big operation tonight. The plan to recruit Aurelius succeeded or failed. He succeeded because he met Grindelwald's minimum requirement, Aurelius not being his enemy. It failed because it failed to achieve the expected best result. Aurelius surrendered and became Dumbledore's enemy. Under this circumstance, Grindelwald values tonight's gathering even more. He wants to establish his own authority and announce his return to the world. To establish authority, one needs a target. The attracted forces from the Ministry of Magic of various countries are the best targets. To establish authority, you also need an audience. The tens of thousands of celebrities, noble wizards and wizards from all walks of life present are the best audience. To put it bluntly, Grindelwald is not satisfied with him and his witch party hiding underground, just like rats causing trouble everywhere. He wants to lead the Wu Kui party and truly sit on the card table. For this reason, he specially chose Paris to hold this gathering, and deliberately chose the French Ministry of Magic, which is now the nominal First Ministry of Magic. I have gone to the VIP room to rest for a while as you asked. Abernethy leaned forward and said. Well, very good, Mr. Sotrallo is coming soon. You go and greet him. Grindelwald once again handed over the task of welcoming guests to Abernethy. It's the most beautiful job ever done besides his nose. During his years at the Ministry of Magic, Abernethy was all too familiar with greetings and send-offs. Not only was he polite and considerate, but he also earned Grindelwald a lot of face. Don't mention anything else, at least in this regard. Abernathy's ability to relax is much better than the arrogant Vita. Leave the venue again and go to the cemetery. Suo Chualuo is not alone this time. As the most reliable ally, at such an important moment, why not bring more people with you to enhance your reputation? According to the notice given in advance, Abernathy walked through the cemetery corridor and headed to the agreed square on the east side of the cemetery. You're sick, Yusuf. You should see a doctor. This is an oath. It's not a disease. You saw it just now. My hand, the hand that made the oath, just, damn it, it's starting again. Again? Abernathy paused. He listened quietly. Yusuf held his arms tightly, and Rita supported him. I have to take you to the hospital, you really need. No, I still have things to do. Yusuf pushed Lita away and stood up unsteadily, as if a gust of wind could blow him down. Call a gust of wind blew. A stab of pain made Yusuf unable to help but press his eyes tightly with his hands. His body softened and he fell to the ground, twitching continuously. Was it really blown down by the wind? Yusuf. No. Don't. Wait. An urgent voice sounded. Newt. Lita was stunned. Why is he here? Newt is in Paris. Lita knows this. Theseus told her, but why does Newt appear here, in the tomb of Père Lachaise? Ah. That's right. Newt is with Aurelius Dumbledore, and since Aurelius Dumbledore is here, it seems reasonable for Newt to come. In an instant, countless thoughts flashed through Junta's mind. Help me. Newt didn't bother to say hello to Lita and directly hugged Yusuf to the end. Tina, who was following him, also came over. What should I do? Tina was a little at a loss. She was an Auror, not a therapist. She had never heard of Yusuf's situation and didn't know what to do. Hold his head, don't move. Newt said very fast. When Tina held Yusuf's head, Newt turned around and opened his suitcase to rummage around. After taking some time, Newt, Lita and Abernathy came over and said, his condition is too serious and his luck is not good. Lita, and this gentleman, you guys, do you know him? He is my brother. Rita said with a complicated expression. Oh, your brother. What? You have a brother? Newt looked at her in surprise. Can he still be saved? Rita asked without answering. You too. Is there anyone here? His life is more important. Tina's tone was not very good. Newt quickly handed a pair of tweezers to Lita. Take it for me, thank you. Fluorescence. A faint bright light lit up from the top of the wand and subconsciously put it into the hand handed over by Rita. When Newt realized it, he was stunned for a moment. This was the old habit. At that time, they were still studying at Hogwarts. Two lonely people, two outcasts, they often gather together, Newt studying magical beasts, and Lita as his assistant. But he didn't expect that this habit would persist until now. He's so lucky. Newt didn't fall into memories for too long. He stretched out his hand to open Yusuf's eyelids, and his lower eyelids were faintly beating. It didn't look like nerves, but like something with its own will. Lucky. Get rid of him, he is so lucky that he is about to die, Tina said angrily. No, you are really lucky. I have seen people like this. They were sick because of a very rare parasite. Newt said as he took out a small bottle from the box and opened it. The stopper was placed under Yusuf's nose so that he could inhale the scent from the bottle. Parasite? You mean? He is so sick because of parasites? Rita said in surprise. It's a very rare parasite. There must have been water dragons wherever he used to stay. This is a magical creature 100 times rarer than wild fire dragons. This kind of parasite is only found in water dragons. But not every water dragon everyone is infected with insects, so this insect is rarer than a water dragon. Newt saw Yusuf's nostrils couldn't help but twitch. He took the bottle back and closed it, and said with a smile, isn't this lucky? Tina was a little speechless. Your luck is really strange. Of course, it's uncomfortable. Even water dragons will be disturbed by these little things, let alone humans. Fortunately, I met me. Very few people know how to treat this kind of parasitic infection. Rita, come closer. He opened his eyelids, and a thin and pointed tentacle crawled out from under his eyelids. Yusuf's dull pupils were instantly bloodshot. Maybe you don't want to see. Hurry up. I can bear it. Tina grinned a little, and her big eyes were squeezed into slits. Okay. Newt took the tweezers and looked into Yusuf's eyes. With quick eyesight and quick hands, he clamped the tentacle tightly. Come out. Come out. Come out. Use caution. This requires skill. The parasite is unwilling to be pulled out. The harder it is, the more it struggles. If the tentacles of the parasite are torn off, it will only allow the parasite to escape and burrow deeper into the ground. Yusuf, who was in a coma, couldn't help but feel severe pain, and every muscle in his body was spasming and twitching. Help me hold him down. Newt also exerted all his strength. The parasite itself was not very strong, but Newt had to ensure that his whole body was tight to accurately control the force. Come out. Finally, Newt won the unequal tug of war, and the parasite with several slender tentacles was forcefully pulled out of Yusuf's eyes by Newt. The tentacles of the parasite that had separated from its host were waving wildly, and the terrifying appearance made the girls present feel uncomfortable. Even Abernathy felt embarrassed and couldn't help but shrink back. Fortunately, I lived up to my fate. Newt breathed a sigh of relief and stuffed the parasite completely into a glass bottle. Obviously, as a magizoologist, Newt is eager to understand any cherished magical creature. This is the first unnamed parasite with all its beards that he has captured, and there is a high probability that he will be the one to name it in the future. You must kill him. Yusuf, who was free of the parasite, quickly came to his senses, and the first sentence he opened his mouth was revenge. Kill? Kill who? Tina subconsciously looked at Lita and Abernathy. In her opinion, Yusuf must have been with them before, and she immediately went to seek confirmation. Being very sensitive when hearing the word kill is an occupational disease of Aurors. Murder, whether among muggles or wizards, is a very serious crime. He may need a few hours to relieve the parasite's toxins. Without the parasite's continuous supply of toxins, the toxins will be excreted soon. Newt was like a doctor giving instructions after surgery. Sorry, we still have something to do, Lita. He is your brother. I haven't asked you yet. When did you have a brother? Newt was full of questions. He had known Rita since she was 12 years old and had never heard of her having a brother. Moreover, Lita is engaged. Will her brother come? This is a very long story. Abernathy enjoyed listening to stories, but unfortunately, he had something else to do. Being valued by Grindelwald, he welcomed several important allies of the Umbrella Party, which not only meant that his status within the Umbrella Party was spiraling upward, but also represented great pressure. The main forces of the Wiccan Party are gathered in Europe. The magic world is so big. There are also 4 huge power territories in Asia, America, Africa and Latin America that are not controlled by the Wiccan Party. Aurelius Dumbledore may seem like a loner, but Grindelwald values him and raises him to the same level of ally as Mr. Soprano. Represents the magical power of North America. Albus Dumbledore's old friends are all over Latin America and Africa, and they are also an important force against the Umbrella Party. In these 2 continents, the Wu Kui Party is the least influential. The remaining representative of the Asian forces is Suo Chualuo. This mysterious Oriental man not only possesses terrifying strength, but even the followers brought by this gathering are not weaker than Vita. If the respect for Aurelius comes from Grindelwald, then Abernathy is in awe from the bottom of his heart when faced with the unfathomable clues. Lita, is he your friend? Newt couldn't help but ask as he watched Abernathy leave. Rita shook her head. He should be from Grindelwald. Wiccan Party? Probably. I just saw him welcoming Aurelius Dumbledore into the venue with my own eyes. Lita nodded. Newt helped Yusuf lie down on a bench aside, and Tina helped change a pillow. Do you know where the wizard hospital is in France? He needs to be taken care of. Newt looked at Lita, who looked at Tina, who looked at Newt. Perfectly closed loop, fell into silence. 3 foreigners can know a hammer. Although Rita was born in the French Lestrange family, she immigrated to England early, otherwise she would not have gone to Hogwarts. This is Tina's first time in France. Although Newt has been here before, he is a magical zoologist, and he only travels around to find magical animals. Who knows about the hospital? He is your brother. Why don't you take care of him? We still have something to do. Tina broke the silence. You're going to the rally too? Lita frowned and stared at Newt, obviously ignoring the "we" in her words. Newt was thin-skinned and whispered, It's Mr. Dumbledore. Dumbledore. Aurelius Dumbledore, he said. He told me to go to the meeting. I don't know why. Newt said quickly. Dumbledore was the person he respected the most, and he didn't want to taint his innocence. By the way, I haven't asked you yet. Why did you appear in France? And you are still with Aurelius Dumbledore. Do you know that you are about to be wanted? Lita asked with a raised eyebrow. What? Wanted? Why? Newt's face was full of questions. I'm just illegally crossing the border. According to the law, I only need to pay a fine. Why am I wanted? Smuggling may be a very serious charge in the Muggle world. However, because it has become too easy to sneak across the magical world, students who have not graduated can easily travel between borders, and wizards do not pay much attention to the concept of borders, so the punishment is not severe. Of course, not heavy is relative. After all, few people can afford to pay such large fines several times. On the contrary, it didn't matter to Newt the least if he was sent back to his country. He was originally a British wizard and always wanted to go home. The charge is for assaulting an Auror. Lita stared at him. Assault on Aurors? Last night, it was Aurors, Newt exclaimed. Rita didn't say anything. Is this a good thing to say or not? Aurelius committed no crime, but he was attacked and hunted by Aurors of the British Ministry of Magic. They all sided with Aurelius, both morally and legally, even if they had a high-sounding reason, to contain and confront the terrifying Black Master Grindelwald. Are you really going to kill him? Newt was furious. Not me. Who are you, Theseus? Newt. We are just Aurors, and we only follow the orders of our superiors. Neither I nor Theseus agree with this decision, but we have no choice. Obedience is the bounden duty of Aurors, Lita said rapidly. After finishing, he took a long breath, held his forehead to calm his excited heart, and said softly, I know what you are thinking, but the problem now is that your attack on the Auror has become a fact. No matter what your purpose or what you think, Travers has sent the wanted application to the Ministry of Magic. He now controls the entire Ministry of Magic's pretending power. This application will definitely be approved. At that time, Aurelius Dumbledore will be classified as an extremely evil dark wizard. Do you know what this means? Not only will the British Ministry of Magic fully pursue it, but it will also be presented to the International Federation of Wizards. This is the only way Grindelwald can. He is also the only person in the world currently classified as an evil dark wizard. Rita smiled bitterly. And you will get the same treatment as Grindelwald's right-hand assistant Vita Razi. Treat me like an evil dark wizard. Newt opened his mouth, and his body suddenly softened, and he fell to the side of the road, murmuring, How could this happen? Tina said angrily. How can you do this? Didn't you invade Aurelius Dumbledore's private territory? You should bear all the consequences yourself. Rita glanced at her and shook her head. That should be the case, but Travers has his own way, and no one in the UK, or at least the Ministry of Magic, can stop him. Hell. Tina cursed. The International Federation of Wizards will not agree to such ridiculous things. But the implementation of the British Ministry of Magic is inevitable, Rita said softly. Lita didn't say anything for a while, she just looked at Newt with her eyes. She knew that Newt must have thought of it too. How is he going to get home? Aurelius doesn't care, because Tina is right, he can handle this kind of thing even if it comes to the end. The International Confederation of Wizards and the Ministry of Magic of other countries of the International Confederation of Wizards are unlikely to admit this accusation. As long as Aurelius doesn't go to England, nothing will happen to him. But Newt can't, he is British and a British wizard. Although he was annoyed that the Ministry of Magic banned him from international travel, it was still better than having a home and not being able to return. How could this happen? Newt held his head in pain. Why did he become homeless overnight? It was fine when I came here, but I can't go back.